Chapter 1826. The chaotic battlefield trembled endlessly. The death of the Sunshine Powerhouse brought great shock to both sides. The Bloodbreeds didn't expect that one of their own would die so quickly. This was unbelievable to them because once their Blood Sea technique was formed, they would have an absolute advantage. Unless the difference in strength was too great, it was impossible for them to die. But now, this impossible thing had really happened. The Bloodbreeds couldn't understand what was going on. The unknown was the greatest fear, so after a short hesitation, the Bloodbreeds began to retreat. When the vampires attacked, they were as unreasonable as they were when they retreated. They didn't dare to stay here any longer before they figured out why Rizhao had suddenly died. Especially at this moment, the Bloodbreeds were no longer at an advantage. Retreating was undoubtedly the safest way. Although they didn't want to admit it, this attack on Mount Fongsuan was undoubtedly a failure. They could only leave first to preserve their strength and plan for the future. Since the Sunshine Powerhouses had begun to retreat, the Bloodbreeds on other levels didn't dare to stay any longer. They all activated their bloody light and fled outside. Lu Yi was about to turn into a bloody light to support the nearest sunshine. How could he bear to see this scene? He was now the rightful lord of Mount Fongsuan. Mount Fongsuan was his other home. The Bloodbreeds had suddenly come here to show off their strength. Even though they had already paid the price of Rizhao's life, they still had to ask for his permission before leaving. He stood still in midair. The bloody light dissipated and Lu Ye's figure was revealed. The next moment, he raised his hands and slowly brought them together in front of his chest. There was nothing there, but Lu Ye's movements were extremely difficult, as if he was pushing up a world. Mount Fongsuan in the south suddenly shook and buzzed. Everyone could clearly feel an invisible and indescribable power spreading from every corner of the world and gathering in one place. The Bloodbreeds didn't know what was going on, but they knew that a disaster was coming. The bloody light dazzled and they ran even faster. After a full 10 breaths, Lu Ye's hands suddenly came together and he shouted, "Seal!" Many blood race cultivators who were about to flee the Fongsuan Mountains seemed to have slammed into an invisible barrier. All of them had a look of terror on their faces because they discovered that they had no way to leave the Fongsuan Mountain. The entire world seemed to have been sealed. Lu Yi, on the other hand, revealed a disappointed expression. That was because Rizhao of the blood race was really fast. In just a few breaths of time, only 2 of them were left. These 2 were left because Rizhao of the humanoid race had risked his life to fight them. The rest of them had already left Mount Fongsuan and escaped into the starry sky. This was something that could not be helped. Although he could mobilize the resources of Mount Fongsuan in the south, sealing off an entire domain was not something that could be done in an instant. In the end, it was still because he was too weak and could not bear the burden of mobilizing the power of the entire domain. If he was Ri, then the effect would be better. Fortunately, there were still a large number of vampires under the sun that were stopped. At this moment, the Blood Tribe cultivators who wanted to be trapped didn't know what was going on, but they instinctively attacked the seal. Lu Yi could clearly sense that the resources of Mount Fongsuan in the south were flowing away at an extremely shocking speed. At this rate, the resources of Mount Fongsuan in the south would be completely depleted in just a few days. This made him recall the scene of him suppressing Rizhao of the insect race in the inner world. Although that battle had not been very long, it had still caused great damage to the resources of the inner world. From the looks of it, it was best not to mobilize the resources of a domain unless it was absolutely necessary. After all, resources were depleted very quickly, and it was not easy to recover them. The originally tense battle had now been completely one-sided. Rizhao of the Blood Tribe had escaped, causing the morale of the remaining Blood Tribe cultivators to plummet. They were trapped in this domain and could not escape, so they could only fight like cornered beasts. The Xiang sisters worked together, and their auras were like rainbows. Wherever they passed, a rain of blood would be stirred up. When the Yu Yao of the humanoid race saw how powerful the 2 of them were, they all followed behind them. In an extremely short period of time, they formed a small killing squad led by the Xiang sisters. In Rizhao's domain, the 2 trapped Blood Tribe cultivators were in great trouble. On the humanoid race's side, there were 4 vampires from the south and 2 vampires from the east and west. There were a total of 8 vampires against the 2 of them. Even though they had the benefits of the Blood Sea, they were still beaten senseless. In just a short while, the vast Blood Sea had been stripped bare by countless attacks, leaving only its shape behind. The Blood Tribe cultivators who had assisted them in the Blood Sea had all been killed. In the end, only the 2 of them were left fighting like cornered beasts. Sooner or later, they would die an unnatural death. The situation was settled. Only then did Lu Yi undo the seal on the domain. He felt a pang in his heart as he sensed the exhaustion of his resources. At this moment, a mournful cry rang out. Ri Zhao's aura weakened as he screamed. It was a Blood Tribe cultivator, Ri Zhao, who had been besieged to death. The 2 races were mortal enemies, so Ri Zhao of the humanoid race naturally would not show mercy. The remaining Blood Tribe cultivator was not far from death. At this moment, the ones besieging Ri Zhao were the 2 vampires from the east, as well as senior martial brother Yu and another Ri Zhao of the humanoid race cultivator that Lu Yi did not recognize. 4 against 1 was an absolute suppression. Looking at the Blood Tribe cultivator Ri Zhao, who was desperately resisting even though he was at an absolute disadvantage, Lu Ye's heart trembled. He hurriedly shouted, "Spare his life." As he spoke, his figure flashed toward the battlefield. A moment later, the disheveled Blood Tribe cultivator Ri Zhao lay on the ground, panting. He had completely become a fish on the chopping board. Beside him, a total of 8 Ri Zhao of the humanoid race had formed a circle with him in the center, eyeing him covetously. This Ri Zhao had completely lost the ability to resist. Not only was his strength almost exhausted, but he had also been hit by the humanoid race's sealing talisman. It could be said that his life was completely in the humanoid race's control. His face was full of unwillingness, but there was nothing he could do. He also had some doubts in his heart because he did not know why the humanoid race wanted to spare his life. Although he did not know the reason, it was better to live than to die. As long as he was alive, there was always a glimmer of hope. This is junior martial brother Lu Yi, right? The oldest, white-haired senior martial brother Yu looked at Lu Yi and nodded with gratification. Ri Zhao was no stranger to Lu Yi. After all, when the Ri Zhao of the various sects communicated with their soul projections, the topic of discussion was him. Everyone knew that Lu Yi had refined the core origin and was the true master of Mount Fengzhen. At the same time, he was also the successor of the Dao tree lineage. Senior martial brother Yu knew Lu Yi, but Lu Yi did not know him. Su Yuqing introduced him at the right time. This is senior martial brother Yu from the southern Jade Clarity Tower. Greetings, senior martial brother Yu. Lu Yi hurriedly bowed. Beside Jade Clarity Tower, a burly man nodded slightly to Lu Yi and introduced himself, Southern Sect Wu Ji. Senior martial brother Wu. Lu Yi bowed again. Next, Lu Yi greeted the other Ri Zhao he had never seen before. In the southern sect, other than Jade Clarity Tower and Wu Ji, there were also Su Pu and Xia Yingyue. Of the 2 from the western sect, Lu Yi knew one of them. It was Zhang Kuan, who had sent him to the illusory blood demon pupil. The other was Wang Xiong. Regardless of whether they knew each other or not, the Ri Zhao treated Lu Yi very kindly. Firstly, Lu Yi had indeed made great contributions to Mount Fengzhen. Secondly, it was because of Su Yuqing. In the eyes of the Ri Zhao, no matter how young Lu Yi was, he was still their junior martial brother. In the future, they would have many interactions. Especially after the 3 sects of Mount Fengzhen had merged, they would see each other frequently. It didn't matter that he was young. As a successor of the Dao Tree sect, as long as he didn't take the wrong path, his future achievements wouldn't be too bad. Junior martial brother, did you just mobilize the Southern Sect's realm force? After everyone got to know each other, Jade Clarity Tower asked. Although he wasn't the master of the realm force and couldn't mobilize the realm force to stop the enemy, the lesser humans were born of Mount Fengzhen and could naturally sense it. Yes. Lu Yi nodded. Well done. Jade Clarity Tower praised. Unfortunately, the blood breeds ran too quickly and couldn't all stay. Hearing these words, the blood breeds Ri Zhao, who had already lost the ability to resist, finally understood what had happened. He looked at Lu Yi in shock. He was quite knowledgeable and naturally knew what it meant to be able to mobilize the realm force of a realm. For a moment, his heart was bleeding. Under the premise that a realm lord was overseeing a realm lord, how was invading a realm lord any different from seeking death? He was only glad that Lu Ye's cultivation wasn't high. Otherwise, none of the blood breeds who came here would be able to escape. Junior martial brother, why do you want to keep him alive? Xia Yingyue seemed to be a woman with a bad temper. Perhaps because of the conflict just now, a baleful aura gathered between her brows. She stared at the blood breeds Rizhao with disgust. The blood breeds are evil. Just kill them. Lu Yi looked at her. Senior martial sister Xia, please don't be impatient. I want his life as an experiment. If this succeeds, it will greatly benefit Mount Fengxuan. Even if it doesn't, we won't lose anything. At that time, this blood breeds will be handed over to senior martial sister to deal with. Xia Yingyue looked at him in confusion. What experiment? Su Yuqing vaguely guessed and immediately used her divine sense to explain to the Rizhao present. After hearing the reason, the Rizhao present all looked at Lu Yi in shock, but at the same time, they were also curious. Under everyone's gaze, Lu Yi slowly walked up to the blood breeds Rizhao. He raised his hand and a drop of precious blood appeared on his fingertip. He looked at him indifferently. Refine it. At first, the blood breeds Rizhao looked at Lu Yi with an indifferent expression. He had already fallen into such a situation where his life and death were in the hands of others, so he had nothing to worry about. He only hated that he couldn't pass on the news that Mount Fengxuan already had a realm lord to his clansmen. But after seeing this drop of precious blood and feeling the powerful holiness contained in it, the blood breeds Rizhao couldn't help but widen his eyes. He looked at the precious blood in disbelief, then looked up at Lu Yi. You're our clan's saint? End of chapter. Chapter 1827. One couldn't blame Nietzsche for having such thoughts. Only the saint venerables of his race could condense precious blood. He himself was a saint venerable, but the precious blood he condensed couldn't contain such a strong sense of holiness. Compared to Lu Ye's precious blood, his precious blood was like the glow of a firefly. Compared to Nietzsche's precious blood, the holiness it contained was extremely weak. The birth of a realm lord in Fengxuan Mountain was already shocking enough, but he never expected that the realm lord was actually a member of his race. However, Lu Yi didn't look like a pure blood tribe member at all. He was just a human. Suppressing the doubt and shock in his heart, he coldly looked at Lu Yi. Wishful thinking. No matter what was going on with this human in front of him, it was a fact that he killed his own people, so he was undoubtedly an enemy. He knew the consequences of refining such a drop of precious blood, so he naturally wouldn't let Lu Yi have his way. Not only that, but when he finished speaking, his entire aura suddenly became dangerous, causing the surrounding Nietzsche's expressions to turn cold. The blood tribe's blood explosion technique was famous. This was a secret technique used by the blood tribe to fight to the death. It was also a self-detonation technique, and its power was unparalleled. Even though Nietzsche was currently sealed by the power of several talismans and had consumed a lot of his energy in the battle just now, as long as he could mobilize a trace of his qi and blood, he could use the blood explosion technique. In the previous battle, many hominid cultivators had suffered losses from this secret technique. Just as Xia Yingyue was about to attack and kill this blood race member Rizhao, Lu Yi reached out and pinched Rizhao's mouth, his expression calm. What are you talking about? He flicked his precious blood into Nietzsche's mouth with a finger. The rapidly rising aura of danger came to an abrupt stop at this moment. Nietzsche reached out and grabbed his neck, as if trying to stop the precious blood from entering his mouth. Then he stuck out 2 fingers and dug into his mouth. But how could it be in time? Suddenly, there was a miserable scream, and a layer of faint golden light enveloped him. Even when he was attacked by several hominid Nietzsche and was seriously injured, this blood tribe member didn't show any weakness. At this moment, it was as if he was suffering the most torturous torture in the world, causing the hominid Nietzsche to feel distressed. To be able to torment someone like him, it must not be an ordinary pain. The battle had come to an end. With Hikari of the blood kindred escaping, the cultivators of the blood kindred who were trapped in this world no longer had the will to fight. They were besieged by the cultivators of the humanoid clan and suffered heavy casualties. The Xiang sisters had made a great contribution. Their powerful holy nature was far more effective against the vampires than the average Yu Yao. Yu Yao led a squad of midgets into the fray, suppressing the enemy to the point where they couldn't even retaliate under her holy nature. At the moment, vampire Rizhao was enduring the pain of the treasure blood tempering his body and would continue for a while. Lu Yi stayed behind to observe while Su Yuqing and Xia Yingyue stood guard beside him. The other Rizhao scattered to clean up the battlefield or eliminate the remnants of the vampire army. In less than 2 hours, the originally noisy domain calmed down. "Hi, Lord." Xiang Yin and her sister returned, bathed in blood. They seemed to be in good condition. Xiang Yin was holding a ball of blood in her hands. Within the ball of blood, there were a few drops of eye-catching blood floating up and down. This was collected from the battlefield. This was undoubtedly the holy blood left behind by the blood kindred. According to Lu Ye's conjecture, the holy blood was actually the blood of the blood progenitor. However, because the blood progenitor was so powerful, even her ordinary blood had unimaginable effects. For example, it could allow the blood kindred to possess their own holy nature. Of course, the refining process was fraught with danger. However, if they succeeded, they would become a holy venerate among the blood kindred. After the death of a holy venerate, the holy blood would be preserved completely. If another blood kindred obtained it, they could find an opportunity to refine it. This was how generations of holy venerates of the blood kindred had been passed down. Otherwise, the blood kindred would have run out of holy blood long ago after the blood progenitor had died so many years ago. In this battle, 2 Rizhao of the blood kindred had died in battle, and 1 had been captured alive. These 3 were undoubtedly holy venerates, so there was holy blood left behind after their deaths. In addition, there were several Yu Yao who were also holy venerates. The Xiang sisters collected all of this holy blood. This thing was a treasure to the blood kindred, but it was no different from poison to other races. Lu Yi stretched out his hand and grabbed the drops of holy blood. He directly activated his power and refined them. Xiang Yin was incredibly envious of Lu Yi. Because of the power of the blood clan, she had an instinctive desire for Lu Ye's holy blood. However, she knew that holy blood couldn't be refined carelessly, or else her life would be in danger. The best way to increase her holiness was to ask Lu Yi for his blood. Lu Ye's precious blood was much safer to refine, and its effects were almost the same as holy blood. Xiang Yin decided to find an opportunity to mention this to Lu Yi after this battle. After all, she and her sister had done a meritorious service, and they deserved to be rewarded. There's also this. Xian Yu offered a storage ring. Lu Yi took it and opened it. He found that it was filled with blood crystals of the blood kindred, so he casually tossed it back. "Thank you, Lord." Xian Yu held the storage ring and expressed his gratitude respectfully. The blood crystals of the blood kindred were similar to the monster cores of demon beasts. These things were useless to ordinary cultivators, but the blood kindred could refine them like spirit jades to increase their own power. Moreover, the effects were even better than refining spirit jades. It could be said that blood crystals were equivalent to a very special cultivation resource for the blood kindred. "Lord, we sisters captured a blood kindred, and we thought that it might be useful to you," Xiang Yin said. She then looked at the blood kindred Rizhao, who was refining the precious blood, and said hesitantly, "How about I go and kill that blood kindred now?" The reason why they deliberately captured the blood kindred cultivator alive was mainly because they were inspired by the battle with the sacred blood mountain in the inner world. At that time, Lu Yi had used the precious blood to plant many people in the sacred blood mountain, and they had contributed a lot in the final battle. Xiang Yin didn't expect that the Lord would actually target Rizhao this time. In comparison, the blood kindred they captured alive seemed insignificant. "There's no hurry." Lu Yi shook his head. The situation here remained to be seen. Perhaps the blood kindred could be of some use. Xiang Yin didn't say anything else and stood quietly to the side. The process seems very dangerous. Will this guy die? Xia Yingyue, who was standing side by side with Su Yuqing, had been observing blood kindred Rizhao's movements. Seeing that his aura seemed to be rapidly weakening, she couldn't help but ask. Su Yuqing shook her head. She couldn't be sure. Xiang Yin said with a smile, Lord, you may not know, but my lord's precious blood is very special. Although there is torture during the refining process, as long as one's will is strong enough, there won't be any danger to one's life. It's very different from ordinary sacred blood. Her sister, Xianyu, nodded vigorously, indicating that this was indeed the case. Xia Yingyue glanced at the sisters. I've long heard that the snow kindred are as pure as ice and as pure as jade, like fairies in the snow. Seeing them today, they really live up to their reputation. She turned and transmitted her voice to Su Yuqing, be careful of these two sisters. Su Yuqing was dumbfounded. Be careful of what? Xia Yingyue grumpily said, your little Dao companion is young and full of vigor. These two sisters are also heavenly beauties with different temperaments. Moreover, they seem to worship your little Dao companion a lot. What do you think we should be wary of? Su Yuqing didn't know whether to laugh or cry. For a moment, she didn't know how to respond. But then again, she hadn't asked Lu Yi anything about the matters between men and women. She could only feel that Lu Yi wasn't simple when it came to this matter. He definitely wasn't a greenhorn. She felt that there was no need to be on guard against Xiang Yin and Xiang Yin because they were Lu Ye's blood servants. If Lu Yi really had any thoughts about them, the two sisters would have long since lost their virginity. But in fact, Su Yuqing knew at first glance that the sisters were still pure as ice and as pure as jade. In the end, blood kindred Rizhao survived. When the golden light enveloping him gradually dissipated and revealed his figure, he was lying on the ground like a dead fish, drenched in sweat. The reason why his performance was so weak was because his strength was still sealed. Lu Yi stood not far from him and frowned. After a moment, he sighed and turned to Xia Yingyue. Senior sister Xia, kill him. He had wasted a drop of blood he had painstakingly condensed. But it wasn't a complete loss. At least Lu Yi learned one thing. Even if he let blood kindred Rizhao refine his blood, he still wouldn't be able to control him completely. It wasn't a completely uncontrollable state. In fact, if Lu Yi ordered him to complete an ordinary task, there wouldn't be a problem. But Lu Yi could feel that blood kindred Rizhao's submission to him wasn't complete. From time to time, rebellious thoughts would appear in the depths of his mind. This was completely different from the blood servants he had subdued before. The blood servants he had subdued before, whether it was Xiang Yin, or Ma Shangxi, they were truly obedient to him and didn't have any thoughts of resistance. They truly regarded him as the heavens and the earth, a true god of the world. But blood kindred Rizhao wasn't like that. This was undoubtedly the result of the difference in strength between them. Rizhao's cultivation was much higher than his, so even if he refined his blood, he still had some thoughts he shouldn't have. Of course, Lu Yi didn't dare to keep such a blood servant. At a critical moment, it could be fatal. As soon as he said this, blood kindred Rizhao, who was so weak that he almost collapsed, became even more rebellious. He even looked at Lu Yi with a trace of hatred. Although it was quickly replaced by begging, it couldn't move Lu Yi at all. Xia Yingyue was also a decisive woman. She took a step forward and slapped blood kindred Rizhao's head. His entire head was smashed into pieces. The headless corpse fell limply to the ground, blood gushing out. Xiang Yin and Xiang Yin quickly stepped forward. One of them skillfully took out the sparkling blood crystal from blood kindred Rizhao's body and put it away like a treasure. The other guided his blood, drawing out the drop of blood kindred Rizhao's saint blood and handed it to Lu Yi to deal with. In this battle, 3 blood kindred Rizhao had fallen. Rizhao was even more difficult to calculate. It could be said that they had suffered a great loss. End of chapter. Chapter 1828. Southern Fangzuan Mountain, Pingyu Peak. This was the spiritual peak where Jade Clarity Tower was located. At this moment, the 3 divisions were gathered together. The invasion of the vampires could be considered a complete failure. Out of the 7 Rizhao that came, 3 of them died in battle, and the rest suffered heavy losses. After the battle, Qin Xianhai personally jumped out of the outer realm to investigate the situation. He found that there was no trace of the vampires around. It was obvious that the previous battle had made the vampires feel uneasy, so they fled far away after escaping from Mount Fanzun. At present, the southern region was still traveling through the starry sky under the guidance of the core. Even though it was still within the bloody extinction star system, there shouldn't be any further obstacles if nothing unexpected were to happen. Just in case, the cultivators from the east and west who had come to provide support didn't rush back. Instead, they chose to stay in the south and wait for the south to pass through the bloody extinction star system before returning. Of the 8 Rikages, only Lu Yi was Yu Yao. He was incomparably eye-catching, but no one dared to underestimate him. Lu Yi had contributed the most in this battle. The deaths of the 3 blood race Rikages were directly or indirectly related to him. Moreover, if he hadn't sealed the realm, who knew how many of the vampires would have fled when they sensed that something was amiss? He definitely wouldn't have let the other party pay such a heavy price. Originally, Ri Zhao of the Miniman race had reluctantly accepted the fact that Mount Fangzuan had another master. However, he still felt a little uncomfortable in his heart. Even if Lu Yi was Su Yuqing's Dao companion, even if he was the successor of the Dao tree lineage, however, this battle had made them deeply realize the convenience of having a master of a domain. It could be said that as long as Lu Yi remained in the south, no matter how strong the enemy was, they would not be able to return alive. As they conversed, the southern and western tribes all spoke kindly of Lu Yi. Lu Yi politely responded. In terms of age, he was the youngest. In terms of cultivation, he was the lowest. Although he had managed to refine the core of Mount Fangzuan by chance and became the master of Mount Fangzuan in name, he knew in his heart that the true master of Mount Fangzuan would always be the little human race. In the future, the Fangzuan mountain would become the backing of the 9 prefectures. Naturally, they would take this opportunity to build a good relationship with the Sunshine sect. During the exchange, someone asked about the core world. Lu Yi did not hide anything and told them everything. The group of Ri Zhao listened with great interest. The sound talisman suddenly vibrated. Lu Yi stopped talking and took it out to check. He frowned and stood up. Senior brothers and sisters, I'll take my leave first. There are some things I need to deal with. What is it? Xia Yingyue asked casually. Lu Yi explained, my 2 blood warriors captured Yu Yao from the blood race. Before coming here, I gave him a drop of my blood treasure to refine, hoping to get some information about Bloody Starless Star from him, just in case. Just now, he said he had a very important piece of information to pass on to me. It seems it has something to do with Bloody Starless Star. Yu Qinglu said, since that's the case, let him come over and talk. What do you think, junior brother? All right. Lu Yi nodded and immediately took out a sound talisman to reply to Xiang Yin. Moments later, the Xiang Yin sisters brought the vampire, Yu Yao, into the main hall. Under the gazes of the crowd, the Xiang Yin sisters were still fine. After all, they had performed a meritorious service earlier. However, the vampire, Yu Yao, seemed to be under a lot of pressure. His position had changed too quickly. Just a few moments ago, he had been locked in a fierce battle with the dwarf race, but now, because he had become Lu Ye's blood warrior, he was standing on the same side. This was somewhat difficult for him to adapt to, but because he had refined the saint blood, there were some things he had to say. He also knew how much the dwarf race hated the blood race, so he naturally felt uneasy. What's your name? Lu Yi looked at his new blood warrior and asked. Reporting to High Lord, this one's name is Ding Bei Feng, the blood warrior replied respectfully. What do you want to say? Ding Bei Feng calmed himself down and said, High Lord, after losing this battle, Absolute Blood Realm will definitely not let this matter rest. The Sunshine Saint Venerables covet Minuscule Mountain very much. This is a rare opportunity, so they are determined to seize it. If it were an ordinary treasure, the blood race might not have any other intentions after suffering such a big loss, but this was Minuscule Mountain. The covetousness and desire for this treasure was engraved in the depths of the blood race's soul. It was a greed inherited from their blood ancestors, so no matter how great the loss was, no blood race member would give up. How many Sunshine Saints are there in Absolute Blood Realm? Lu Yi asked. Although the blood race had sent out 7 Sunshine Saints before, Lu Yi estimated that that was not the full strength of the blood race. There would definitely be some Sunshine Saints left to guard the realm. 9. Ding Bei Feng replied. Wu Ji coldly snorted. Almost half of the 7 Sunshine Saints who came first were killed. Now you only have 6 Sunshine Saints left. What can you do? The key was that Lu Yi was here. With his identity as the Lord of Minuscule Mountain and his powerful holiness, if another battle broke out, the South would not be as passive as before. If the blood race dared to invade, they would not be able to return alive. What's more, the human race had 8 Sunshine Saints. In terms of the highest combat strength, the human race was not at a disadvantage. It's not the same. We underestimated the enemy before. After this defeat, our realm will definitely use their ancestral artifact. Ancestral artifact? Lu Yi raised his brow. What ancestral artifact? What kind of power does this ancestral artifact have? Ding Bei Feng shook his head. Only the Sunshine Saints can come into contact with the ancestral artifact. I have only heard of it but have never seen it with my own eyes. I don't know how powerful the ancestral artifact is. However, there is a legend in our realm. It is said that many years ago, several powerful realms joined forces to attack our realm. At that time, more than 20 Sunshine Saints were sent. Even so, when the Sunshine Saints of our realm took out the ancestral artifact, they still fled in defeat. Lu Yi frowned as he listened. If he was not wrong, the ancestral artifact should be something left behind by the blood ancestor. It was hard to say how powerful this thing was. If the legend Ding Bei Feng spoke of was true, then this ancestral artifact should not be underestimated. After all, more than 20 Sunshine Saints from several realms had failed to defeat the ancestral artifact. Every realm has their own legends. Legends are legends because they are exaggerated stories passed down from generation to generation. They may not be true, Wang Xiong from the West said. The Sunshine Saints nodded. Naturally, they understood this logic. It may not be just a legend. An old voice sounded. Everyone quickly looked at Yu Qinglu. The latter said, "This old man has also heard of this." Everyone was stunned. Yu Qinglu said slowly, "Haven't you been curious? The blood race is so notorious and has enemies everywhere in the universe. Is there no one who wants to get rid of the blood race once and for all? Unlike the insectoids, the blood race isn't as mobile. The blood race's few foundational realms are traceable. Take the blood extinction world for example. It's in the blood extinction star system. If people work together, can't they destroy it?" Lu Yi could not help but fall into deep thought. In fact, he had thought about this before. The insect race could not be wiped out. That could not be helped. No one knew how many insect nests were floating in the universe and how many insect race were hiding in the various realms, waiting to rise up. However, the blood race was different. One could find out where their foundation realms were with just a little investigation. There were many races and realms that hated the blood race. How could they continue to exist? When Lu Yi considered this before, he simply thought that it would be difficult to form an alliance and that the price to pay for an expedition was too high. That was why no one did it. But now, it seemed that was not the case. Someone did it before, and it seemed to have happened more than once. However, without exception, they all failed. Among them, there was the shadow of the ancestral artifact. However, it happened so long ago that this old man only heard about it by chance. I don't know the specifics. Lu Yi suddenly regretted having Xia Yingyue kill the vampire Sunshine. If he had known this would happen, he would have gotten some information from him before killing him. However, the vampire Sunshine's submission to him was not complete, so there might not be much to gain from getting information from him. The ancestral artifact was the blood race's greatest secret. It was very likely that he would not mention it. Actually, there is no need to worry too much about this. If the vampire Sunshine dares to attack with the ancestral artifact, we can just attack him head-on. The ancestral artifact may be extraordinary, but Minuscule Mountain is also a treasure. It is not inferior to it. Chen Xianhai said in a low voice. The Rayas nodded. However, there is one thing we need to pay attention to. Zhang Kuan turned to Yu Qinglu. Senior brother Yu, have you calculated the path of the Minuscule Mountain? Did you avoid the absolute blood world? Yu Qinglu said, "We calculated when we entered the absolute blood star system. According to the marks on the star chart, the path of the minuscule mountain should not be too close to the absolute blood world. It should be more than 10 days away from the absolute blood world." Zhang Kuan nodded. "Then there is nothing to worry about. We only need to guard the headquarters and kill the enemies if they come. Once the headquarters safely enters the absolute blood star system, it will be fine." The blood race was interested in the minuscule mountain, but the Miniman tribe had no interest in the absolute blood world. The absolute blood star system was only a part of the long journey. If the blood race had not discovered the peculiarity of the minuscule mountain and came to investigate, exposing the existence of the minuscule mountain, the previous battle would not have happened. The entire minuscule mountain would have quietly passed through the absolute blood star system and left. The previous battle had caused the blood race to suffer heavy losses. Therefore, even if the blood race really did have the ancestral artifact, the Miniman tribe could rest easy as long as they hid in the absolute blood star system. After the meeting ended, everyone dispersed. Lu Yi and the 2 Rizhao from the east were arranged to live on Pengyu Peak. After the battle, they each recuperated. Several days passed peacefully, until a loud noise suddenly resounded through the absolute blood star system and the entire world began to shake. Lu Yi, who was condensing his own treasure blood, was startled and quickly spread out his divine sense to sense the surroundings. The next moment, powerful auras appeared. They were undoubtedly the Rizhao from the Miniman tribe. They flew up from different positions and, like Lu Yi, spread out their divine sense to investigate. Lu Ye's face sank. Unlike the Rizhao's investigation as the origin master, he could clearly feel some changes in the absolute blood star system. Originally, the southern minuscule mountain was rapidly moving through the starry sky, but at this moment, Lu Yi felt that the entire world seemed to have encountered a strange resistance. Under this resistance, the southern minuscule mountain was rapidly slowing down. It was because of the sudden appearance of this resistance that caused the absolute blood star system to shake. End of this chapter. Chapter 1829. In the southern Fangsuan mountain, there was a sudden change. Rizhao and the others all investigated, and Lu Yi was the first to sense it. What made him feel strange was that he clearly sensed that at this moment, the southern Fangsuan mountain seemed to have encountered a strong resistance. Because of the core, its speed in the starry sky was rapidly decreasing under the effect of this resistance, but where did this resistance come from? His mind drifted out, and his grand vision spied outside the domain. This was a convenience only the master of the domain could have. Otherwise, even someone like Chen Xianhai would have to jump out to investigate the situation outside the domain. Soon, Lu Ye's mind was attracted by the scene in front of him. In front of the headquarters of Fangsuan Mountain, there was a huge mountain. This mountain was strange, with a total of 6 spirit peaks of different heights. The one in the middle was the highest, and its height decreased in descending order. Above the 6 majestic spirit peaks, there was a faint bloody light, seeping out a dark red color. Taking a closer look, the mountain with 6 spirit peaks was like a giant hand that held up the sky towards Fangsuan Mountain. The 6 spirit peaks that towered into the heavens were the 6 fingers of the giant hand. Behind the towering mountain that looked like a giant hand, there was a slightly curved, roughly crescent-shaped, huge piece of land. A strong aura of the domain came rushing over. Lu Yi instantly understood what this was. One of the foundation domains of the blood race, the blood extinction domain. This domain was formed from a part of the blood ancestor's body after his death. The blood extinction domain was a torso without limbs and a head, while the blood extinction domain was an arm, which was why it had such a strange shape. But the situation was a little strange. Lu Yi transmitted to Yu Qinglu, "Senior brother, are you sure that the blood extinction domain is not on the path of the headquarters?" During the meeting a few days ago, Chen Xianhai had mentioned this matter. At that time, the answer given by Yu Qinglu was that according to their calculations, the route of the headquarters of Fangsuan Mountain would be more than 10 days away from the blood extinction domain. This was obviously inconsistent with what Lu Yi saw at this moment. Yu Qinglu quickly replied, confirming that the previous calculations were correct. Lu Yi composed himself and said, "Senior brother, the blood extinction domain is in front of the headquarters of Fangsuan Mountain, blocking the path of the headquarters. The changes in the headquarters are related to this domain." Yu Qinglu was surprised and then said, "This old man will go take a look." As he spoke, he leaped up. Lu Yi warned, "Senior martial brother, be careful." Although he didn't feel much threat from the blood extinction world for the time being, and he didn't even see the figures of the blood race cultivators, the situation was strange, and he still had to be prepared. Yu Qinglu quickly jumped out of the bounded domain to investigate the situation. When he saw the situation in front of him, he couldn't help but be stunned. After a while, he returned and told Rizhao what he had seen. Rizhao was shocked. In the telepathic thoughts, Rizhao and the others were communicating. Yu Qinglu said, "Our calculations can't be wrong, but now the blood absolute world is blocking our way, and the entire blood absolute world is filled with a strange repulsive force, hindering our advance." Chen Xianhai said, "If the impossible happened, then there is only one explanation." Wang Xiong continued, "The blood absolute world has shifted from its original position to here." This was also what the other Rizhao were thinking. Otherwise, there was no way to explain the current situation. However, how difficult was it to shift a bounded domain? Even if the blood absolute world really had a ruler, it wouldn't be easy to do such a thing, let alone in such a short period of time. The blood absolute world most likely didn't have a ruler. In order to give birth to a ruler, the bounded domain must first have an origin consciousness. The blood absolute world was a part of the blood progenitor's body. If it really had an origin consciousness, it would be the remnant of the blood progenitor's consciousness. Just like back in the inner world, the drop of treasure blood had given birth to a consciousness, it could be considered an extension of the blood progenitor's consciousness. Since there was no ruler of the bounded domain, but the bounded domain had still shifted by a large margin, it couldn't help but remind the Rizhao of what they had heard a few days ago. The power of the ancestral artifact? Someone guessed. Apart from the mysterious ancestral artifact, no one could think of how the blood race could do such a thing. Lu Yi also thought of this point and immediately asked Ding Beifeng, "Has the blood absolute world ever been shifted? Does the ancestral artifact have the power to shift the blood absolute world?" Ding Beifeng replied blankly, "I don't know." Lu Yi knew that he couldn't count on him. This guy didn't even know what the ancestral artifact was, so how could he know anything else? According to him, only Rizhao and the Holy Sage had the right to come into contact with the ancestral artifact. Lu Yi even suspected that not every blood race member could come into contact with it. It was very likely that the ancestral artifact was in the hands of the strongest blood race member in the blood absolute world. "Junior brother Lu, the division's progress is blocked. Do you have any good ideas?" Xia Ingyue asked through voice transmission. Even someone as strong as Rizhao couldn't interfere in this matter. Only the ruler of the bounded domain, Lu Yi, might be able to do something. Lu Yi pondered for a moment, then said, "I can use the power of the bounded domain to resist. If we can break down the obstruction, the path ahead will be smooth." The ancestral artifact's might was unknown. Neither Lu Yi nor Rizhao wanted the division to be blocked in this part of the starry sky. For the time being, the blood race didn't seem to be doing anything, but if they really did leave the division behind, no one could say for sure what the consequences would be. Thus, it was best to leave this place as soon as possible. "Then let's give it a try," Yu Qinglu said in a low voice. Lu Yi nodded and immediately immersed himself in mobilizing the bounded domain's resources to resist the strange power coming from the blood absolute world. The effect was very obvious. The division speed, which had been gradually slowing down, picked up again. But good times didn't last long. As if sensing the change in the division, the strange power coming from the blood absolute world suddenly became much stronger. This caused the division's speed to drop again, and there were even signs of it stopping. Lu Yi could only increase the mobilization of bounded domain's power. This tug and struggle continued for a while. When the two bounded domains approached a certain distance, Lu Yi suddenly found that the entire blood absolute world was actually retreating. It seemed to be maintaining a distance from the division's Fangtzuan mountain while preventing the division from moving forward. Lu Yi couldn't help but frown. Senior brothers, the situation isn't good. This kind of resistance is seriously exhausting our bounded domain's resources. Moreover, the other party can also mobilize bounded domain's power. In the process of resisting the blood absolute world, Lu Yi had already seen through the essence of the strange power. It was the bounded domain's resources. This had become a battle of the two great bounded domain's resources. It could be said that it was a battle of self-destruction. If they couldn't completely get rid of the blood absolute world, then this kind of battle would continue. Sooner or later, the entire Fangtzuan Mountain's resources would be exhausted. Of course, the blood absolute world wouldn't have a good end either. But this kind of result was absolutely unacceptable to the Xiaomen race. Yu Qingluo's voice sounded. If they want to stop, then let them. Junior brother, let the division stop. Lu Yi gave up on mobilizing bounded domain's power. The next moment, the entire southern Fangtzuan mountain shook violently and suddenly stopped in the starry sky. The blood absolute world, which had been constantly retreating, sensed this and slowly came to a stop. Junior brother Lu, you take charge of the division and act according to the situation. The other junior brothers and junior sisters, follow this old man out to fight the enemy. Yu Qinglu ordered and took the lead to fly out. Since they couldn't compete based on bounded domain's resources, then they would directly determine the winner from the cultivator level. The Xiaomen race had 8 sunshine, while the blood race only had 6. In terms of numbers, the Xiaomen race had more. And no matter what the ancestral artifact was, there must be a sunshine of the blood race activating it. In other words, if they went out now, they would definitely have the advantage. If they could restrain the sunshine of the blood race and prevent them from activating the ancestral artifact, Lu Ye's side could find an opportunity to break through the blood absolute world seal and leave directly. This was Yu Qingluo's plan. In the blink of an eye, the 8 sunshine left the bounded domain and turned into 8 streams of light, rapidly approaching the blood absolute world. Yu Qinglu transmitted his voice everywhere. Don't enter the bounded domain, only attack outside. Regardless of whether there was a realm master on the other side, they could still mobilize bounded domain's power. So, rashly entering the bounded domain was a suicidal approach. Just like when the blood race invaded Fangtzuan Mountain, once the bounded domain was sealed, they would be beaten up. Only attacking outside and creating chaos could create an opportunity for Lu Ye's side. The sunshine received the order, and all of them activated their magic power, ready to attack. But at this moment, the bloody light that had been lingering on the giant hand suddenly became incomparably bright. The 8 sunshine of the hominin clan all felt a chill all over their bodies at the same time, and a feeling of extreme danger lingered in their hearts. Be careful! Qin Xianhai shouted. Without thinking, he immediately took out a defensive red talisman. Not only him, but Yu Qinglu also took out a defensive red talisman at the same time. The others all activated their own methods to protect themselves. The next moment, a loud sound rang out from the depths of their hearts. Under everyone's gaze, the giant hand shook violently. Then, a bright bloody light was reflected from the giant hand, turning into an incomparably huge bloody palm print that could cover the sky, and push towards the 8 sunshine of the hominin clan. This scene was extremely shocking. It was as if a giant had slapped the 8 sunshine of the hominin clan. Under this palm, the 8 sunshine of the hominin clan were as small as ants. Angry roars rang out, and the sunshine of the sunshine tried their best to resist. The 2 defensive red talismans were the first to break, and then the 8 figures were like 8 kites. The moment they were hit by the bloody palm print, they were sent flying high into the air, all of them dripping with blood. Go! Yu Qingluo's face was pale, and he shouted. The 8 figures returned as quickly as they left. In the headquarters of the Fangtzuan Mountain, Lu Yi, who was watching this scene from afar, was shocked. He finally knew why many years ago, when several major realms joined forces and sent out more than 20 sunshine, they still couldn't take down the absolute blood world. With such a terrifying attack, not to mention 20 sunshine, even 50 sunshine couldn't do it. The blood race could use the power of the ancestral artifact to move the absolute blood world, and even use the power of the ancestral artifact as the source of power of the absolute blood world to launch such a terrifying attack. As long as the ancestral artifact was not lost, the absolute blood world would never be taken down. In contrast, what he could do as the Lord of the Realm was very limited. It was limited to within the realm, and there was no way he could spread the realm's foundation outside the realm. End of chapter. Chapter 1830. When Yu Qinglu and the others returned, they were all injured. Fortunately, their injuries were not serious. Fortunately, they had taken out 2 defensive red talismans when they saw the situation was bad. Otherwise, even if the 8 of them joined forces, they would not have been able to avoid serious injuries in the face of that terrifying attack. This confrontation made the little human tribe fully aware of the strength of the Blood Absolute World. In the previous battle, the Blood Absolute World had suffered heavy losses, and even 3 Rizhao had died. This inevitably gave rise to the idea that the Blood Absolute World was not so simple. But now they knew that a world that could survive under the hatred of so many races was not as simple as it seemed. In order to take down the Heart-Inch Mountain, the Blood Absolute World could be said to have done their best. The current situation was a little awkward for the little human tribe. The headquarters of the Heart-Inch Mountain had been forced to stop here. Although there were many Rizhao gathered here, they could not kill their way into the Blood Absolute World. Even approaching was dangerous. How could they escape? Moreover, Lu Yi faintly felt that the Blood Absolute World's methods were not limited to this. Their goal was to take down the Heart-Inch Mountain in the south. Just forcing the Heart-Inch Mountain to stop was meaningless, so there must be a backup plan. The backup plan of the blood race came quickly. Less than an hour after Yu Qinglu and the other Rizhao returned to the Heart-Inch Mountain, Lu Yi, who had been observing the situation outside, discovered the changes in the Blood Absolute World. On the giant hand, a rich blood color bloomed, and then an illusory giant hand slowly took shape. The giant hand was vivid and lifelike, like the shape of 6 mountains. It had 6 fingers, and the fingernails on the fingertips were sharp and slender, like 6 sharp blades. This illusory giant hand stretched out from the Blood Absolute World and grabbed at the Heart-Inch Mountain in the south. Soon after, the entire Heart-Inch Mountain was in the palm of its hand. Lu Yi immediately sensed a strange force invading from outside the world. He immediately mobilized the foundation of the world to resist. At this moment, he finally understood the intentions of the Blood Extinction World. The other party wanted to use this method to deplete the Fangsuan Mountain's foundation. Once the Fangsuan Mountain's foundation was depleted to a certain extent, the blood race's power would be able to invade the world and affect all the humans living here. If the Heart-Inch Mountain lost its foundation, then the role he could play as the master of the world would become very limited. At that time, the Blood Absolute World's ancestral weapons would be very difficult to resist in the south. Realizing this, Lu Yi hurriedly passed on the information to the other Rizhao, thinking of countermeasures. In the current situation, the southern Fangsuan Mountain could not escape because the Blood Absolute World could also move. It was like a dogskin plaster that maintained a certain distance from the southern side. There was no way to escape, and there was no way to attack. The outcome of the previous 8 Rikages was already obvious. The power of the ancestral artifact of the vampires was truly terrifying. Lu Yi could only continue to mobilize the realm's resources to resist the blood race's invasion. It wouldn't matter in the short term, but this kind of temporary solution was destined to not last long. A few days later, Rizhao was still at a loss. They used to be able to think of a solution even if they encountered a difficult situation, but this time, they really couldn't think of a good solution. He couldn't avoid it, and he couldn't fight it either. It was really worrying. Lu Yi came to Su Yuqing's sleeping quarters and told her some of his thoughts. Su Yuqing immediately shook her head. No, it's too dangerous. Lu Yi had just said that he wanted to infiltrate the Blood Absolute World. How could she agree to this? Previously, the 8 of them had worked together to preserve their lives under that terrifying attack. Even so, they had still been injured. If Lu Yi and Yu Yao were to be hit by that attack, they would undoubtedly die. Let me finish. Lu Yi grabbed her hand and gently rubbed it as he said, when I was in the kingdom of the 9 states, I once entered the blood absolute world. At the time, I discovered that I could mobilize the entire blood absolute world, but it was too difficult, so I didn't try. Later, I thought about it. The blood refinement realm is the blood ancestor's remnant body. I refined the blood ancestor's precious blood, so I have a part of her power. That's why I can use her power to move her remnant body. The blood extinction realm is also the blood ancestor's remnant body. Logically speaking, I should be able to move it. If that's the case, I only need to stir up a storm in the blood refinement realm. No matter what the blood race's deployment there is, it will be disrupted. In the past few days, he had been thinking about this matter and observing the situation in the blood absolute world. He could vaguely feel that there was a strange connection between him and the blood absolute world, but because of the distance, this connection was very weak. This was why he had come up with this idea. The blood race was currently hiding in the blood absolute world, and Rizhao was definitely urging the power of the ancestral artifact. This kind of thing couldn't be easily disturbed. If Lu Yi went to stir up a storm, it would be a fatal blow to the blood race. What if your idea is wrong? Su Yuqing still shook her head. Lu Yi said, whether it's right or wrong, I only need to get closer to the blood absolute world to know. The closer I am, the more obvious that feeling will be. If I'm wrong, I'll immediately return. Su Yuqing didn't say anything. Lu Yi said, I know you're worried, but the current situation can't be resolved except from within the blood race. The blood race's power is currently corroding our world. There's no need to worry about it in the short term, but it will consume our world's resources. Once things reach a point of no return, our world will have no other choice but to give up on Mount Minuscule in the south. The lesser race has waited for so many years, and now they finally have a chance to unify the blood race. I don't think anyone will be willing to give it up. But it's too dangerous. Su Yuqing was deeply worried. I already felt uneasy when I let you take the risk of going to the illusory blood demon eye. Now that you're going to the blood absolute world, there's no reason for you to take all the risks for our race. Lu Yi smiled. I may be a human, but I'm also the master of Mount Minuscule. Can't I take the lead in this matter? He gently patted the back of her hand. Don't worry, I'm good at disguising myself as a blood race member. Moreover, I won't be going alone. Su Yuqing was puzzled. Who are you taking with you? Beifeng. Lu Yi increasingly felt that it was a wise decision for the Xiang sisters to capture Beifeng alive. Otherwise, he would have to go through a lot of trouble to sneak into the blood absolute world. Also, I'll leave a clone here. If there's any movement on the main body's side, the clone will be able to sense it, Lu Yi added. Precious blood clone? Su Yuqing asked. Lu Yi shook his head and condensed a talent tree avatar in front of her. The reason why he condensed a talent tree avatar was naturally because their connection was closer. Moreover, after his original body left, he would need the talent tree avatar to guard this realm and mobilize the foundation of this realm to resist the invasion of the vampires. Your doppelganger technique is truly profound. Su Yuqing looked at the main body and then at the clone. If she saw it at first glance, she really wouldn't be able to tell. The main body took out a set of clothes and was about to throw it to the clone, but Su Yuqing took it and personally put it on the clone. Behave yourself. Su Yuqing lowered her head, patted the doppelganger's big hand, and said, remember what you said. If things are not as you said, return immediately. Our clan's 8 Rizhao are here, there will be a way. Got it. The main body nodded. After I leave, you can tell the other senior brothers. When to make a move, the clone will inform you. A moment later, the main body quietly left Fengsuan Mountain with Beifeng and swept into the depths of the starry sky. In order to avoid being exposed, the master and servant didn't go in the direction of the blood absolute world. Instead, they went in a direction far away from this world. It wasn't until a few days later that the master and servant took a big detour and rushed in the direction of the blood absolute world. Beifeng controlled the bloody light and wrapped himself and Lu Yi. Originally, Lu Yi was wondering if he should use the 1,000-faced spirit runes to change his appearance and disguise himself as a blood race member. This way, he could avoid the risk of being exposed. However, after talking with Beifeng, Lu Yi knew that there was no need to go through so much trouble. Because there were humans in the Blood Absolute world. The Blood Absolute world wasn't the only world in the entire Blood Absolute star system. There were dozens of other worlds of various sizes. These worlds had different races living in them, and they were all subordinate to the blood race. They could become the blood race's food at any time. In such a big environment, there were also creatures of various races living in the Blood Absolute world. Naturally, there were many humans. However, cultivation was a problem because the blood race had strict control over their food. Basically, they wouldn't let their food's cultivation grow too high. Constellation was the limit. They definitely wouldn't give birth to a Yu Yao. Therefore, Lu Yi only used the thousand-faced spirit runes to change his appearance slightly. He also used the pseudo-prestige spirit runes to disguise his strength to the constellation level. If he followed Beifeng like this, even if the other blood race members saw him, they would only think that he was Beifeng's food. Because they had taken a big detour, the master and servant approached the Blood Absolute world from another direction. Lu Yi carefully sensed. As he got closer, he became more and more sure that his guess was right. He had a similar connection with the Blood Absolute world as he did with the Blood Refined world. In other words, he should be able to mobilize the Blood Absolute world. This kind of mobilization wasn't done by the master of the world. It was done because he had refined the power of the Blood Ancestor and used it to mobilize the Blood Ancestor's remnant body. It was similar to how the Blood Absolute world relied on the power of the ancestral artifact to mobilize the world's foundation. In Lu Ye's opinion, the Blood Absolute world was much smaller than the Blood Refined world. After all, one was only an arm, while the other was an entire torso. There was naturally a big difference in size. It was difficult for him to mobilize the Blood Refined world, but it didn't mean that he couldn't mobilize the Blood Absolute world. Things were getting easier. There were no twists and turns in entering the Blood Absolute world. The characteristics of Beifeng's blood race were too obvious, so even if the blood race cultivators sensed him approaching, they didn't stop him. Following behind Beifeng, Lu Yi felt that the foundation of the Blood Absolute world was indeed very strong. It was far from what the Blood Refined world could compare to. However, the barrenness of the Blood Refined world should be related to that ancient seal. Otherwise, the blood race would have one more foundational realm. End of chapter. Chapter 1831. Outside the Blood Absolute world, there were not many things that could be seen. But inside the Blood Absolute world, Lu Yi immediately discovered many anomalies. He looked up and saw streaks of bloody light rising from all over the blood extinction realm. They were like pillars of blood that connected the heavens and the earth. There were thousands of such pillars in the blood extinction realm. It was a spectacular sight to behold from afar. The master and servant had entered from the center of the blood extinction realm. The nearest blood pillar was only a few dozen kilometers away. Lu Yi focused his gaze, hoping to find the source of the blood pillar. If he wasn't mistaken, these abnormal scenes must be related to the blood race's use of the ancestral artifact, but Lu Yi didn't understand what the ancestral artifact was and why it could cause such strange phenomena in the realm of absolute blood when it was activated. Soon, Lu Yi saw the source of the blood pillar. To his surprise, it was a blood pond. Blood pools existed in the blood refinement realm, and there were quite a few of them. That was why the ambitious vampires could choose the nearest blood pool to cultivate in. Of course, most of the vampires who did so died in there. The blood extinction realm naturally had blood ponds as well. However, at this moment, the blood pond seemed to be boiling. Dense bloody light surged out of it and soared into the sky, forming the blood pillar Lu Yi saw. Lu Yi understood that the source of the other blood pillars should be the blood pools. What infuriated him was that at this very moment, a large number of living beings were being brought to the side of the blood pool by the blood clan from all directions. The blood clan completely ignored the cries and pleas of these living beings and threw them all into the blood pool. The blood ponds were like man-eating beasts. Any living being thrown into them would at most float a few times before disappearing without a trace. Has something like this happened before? Lu Yi asked through voice transmission. I've never seen anything like this before. Bei Feng shook his head. This was the first time he had seen such a scene. There were countless blood feasts in the blood extinction boundary. However, with his divine thought, he could tell that almost all of them had disappeared. Their fates could be imagined. Bei Feng's expression changed. It was at this moment that Yu Yao's aura rapidly approached. The master and servant turned to look and saw a blood race descending. She glanced at Bei Feng in surprise. You're still alive? Northern Wind sneered. Aren't you still alive? From the way they spoke, Lu Yi guessed that the relationship between Bei Feng and Yu Yao was not too good. Previously, when the blood race army invaded Mount Fengzuan in the south, the blood race had suffered heavy losses. Some of the quick-witted ones managed to escape, while the slower ones were left behind in Mount Fengzuan. A few of the blood breeds were fast and had returned to the blood extinction world early. However, there were still many blood breeds who had not returned in time. This was also the reason why the blood race did not become suspicious when Ding Beifeng brought Lu Yi into the blood extinction world. It was because the scattered blood race members were returning one after another. If you're not dead, then hurry up and move. What are you spacing out for? Yu Yao of the blood race scolded impatiently. Beifeng frowned. What are they doing? The blood tribe member, Yu Yao, left in a flash, as if she couldn't be bothered with Ding Beifeng. If it were in the past, Ding Beifeng would definitely not have done anything unnecessary. After all, it wasn't just a day or two that everyone disliked each other. It had been like this for so many years. However, as Lu Ye's blood servant, he knew that Lu Yi urgently wanted to understand some information about the blood extinction world. Naturally, he couldn't let the other party leave just like that. He immediately activated his holy attribute and looked at the other party coldly. Yu Yao was first stunned, then shocked. She looked at Ding Beifeng in fear. When did you refine the holy blood? Impudent. Beifeng snorted. Yu Yao's face alternated between green and red. Although she was unwilling, she still bowed respectfully. Greetings, holy senior. Those who could refine sage blood were holy sovereigns. No matter how hard Yu Yao thought about it, she couldn't understand where Ding Beifeng had gotten his hands on sage blood. Moreover, he had actually managed to refine it. With this, the gap between their statuses had been pulled apart. Unless she also refined a drop of sage blood, she would forever be inferior to Ding Beifeng. Her heart was filled with jealousy, unwillingness, and helplessness. Tell me, Ding Beifeng said indifferently. This time, Yu Yao no longer dared to show any displeasure. She immediately explained the whole story. After the vampires returned, they began to activate the ancestral artifact's power together, throwing all the blood in the realm of absolute blood into the blood pool as a blood sacrifice. This was one of the rituals. Now, all the blood tribe members in the blood extinction world were busy with this. In just a few days, who knew how much blood had been sacrificed? After Yu Yao finished speaking, she looked at Ding Beifeng cautiously. Although she knew that her life wouldn't be in danger even if she didn't get along with Ding Beifeng, if Ding Beifeng wanted to humiliate her, she wouldn't be able to resist. Fortunately, Ding Beifeng didn't have such thoughts. He just waved his hand and said, "Scram." Yu Yao felt as if she had been pardoned. She cupped her fists and turned into a streak of bloody light before flying away. Ding Beifeng looked at Lu Yi. Lu Yi was currently staring in a certain direction. If the entire blood extinction world was an arm, then that direction would be the wrist. Lu Yi could sense that the blood tribe members were gathered there. Moreover, that was the place where the energy fluctuations were the most chaotic in the entire blood extinction world. If he wasn't mistaken, that was where the so-called ancestral artifact was located. Lu Yi really wanted to know what the ancestral artifact was, but he also knew that now wasn't the time to inquire about it. His purpose here was to stir up a storm and ruin the blood tribe's plans. His most basic goal was to free Mount Fengzuan in the south from the blood extinction world and leave this galaxy. If possible, he could make further progress on this foundation. Of course, this would depend on the circumstances. Retracting his gaze, Lu Yi ordered, "Throw me into the blood pool." Ding Beifeng replied. He stepped forward and grabbed Lu Ye's collar. Lu Yi immediately put up a furious struggle. According to his previous experiments in the blood extinction world, if he wanted to mobilize the entire world, he would have to go deep into the blood pool. At first, he was still thinking about how to do this without anyone noticing. Unexpectedly, the entire blood extinction world was undergoing a blood sacrifice ceremony. This undoubtedly made things easier for him. Ding Beifeng's face was cold. He ignored Lu Ye's struggles and brought him to the nearest blood pool. Under the gazes of many vampires, he threw Lu Yi in. Lu Ye's figure floated up and down in the blood pool for a moment before disappearing without a trace. Lu Yi went deeper into the blood pool, where the internal passages extended in all directions. The underground passages were undoubtedly the blood vessels of the blood progenitor. Now that he had entered without a hitch, Lu Yi was troubled. Back in the blood extinction world, he had entered the blood progenitor's heart. This position was undoubtedly a vital point for any living being. Mobilizing from such a position would undoubtedly yield twice the results with half the effort. The blood extinction world was formed from one of the blood progenitor's arms, so there was no vital point to speak of. After some thought, Lu Yi suddenly had a flash of inspiration. There really wasn't any vital point on the arm, but there were spirit cavities on the arm. Those spirit cavities were undoubtedly the points where energy gathered. In the end, however, the blood progenitor wasn't a human. He didn't know how her spirit cavities differed from those of the human race, so he could only carefully search for them. The blood pool Lu Yi had entered was very close to the elbow. To a human, this was a very crucial spirit cavern, and it was also a place where one's blood energy converged. After searching for a while, Lu Yi found a location that matched the characteristics of this place. This place was different from the other places that Lu Yi had passed through before. If the other passages were just a straight road, then this location was a crossroad. Of course, this location was more complicated than a crossroad. It was the intersection of many passages. If he wasn't mistaken, this should be one of the blood progenitor's spirit cavities. From this, it seemed that the blood progenitor's spirit cavities were connected to the human race. Lu Yi immediately settled down and immersed his mind. The connection with the blood extinction world gradually grew closer, and Lu Yi once again felt as though he was wearing a layer of heavy armor. He had experienced this feeling back in the blood extinction world, but the blood extinction world was simply too big. The heavy armor on his body made it difficult for him to move, so he couldn't mobilize the blood extinction world. In comparison, although it was still heavy, it was undoubtedly much better than when he was in the blood extinction world. This confirmed his previous conjecture. The blood extinction world was much smaller than the blood extinction world, so it would be much easier for him to mobilize it. As time passed, the connection grew closer and closer, and Lu Ye's mind also began to sublimate. Until a certain moment, when this wondrous connection reached its limit, Lu Yi suddenly felt like the entire domain was under his control. With a single thought, everything within the domain was imprinted into his mind. He saw countless members of the blood race flying around busily. He heard the screams and curses of many blood feasts. He felt the throbbing of the entire world of blood extinction. This arm that had lost its vitality for many years seemed to be coming back to life. However, at this moment, the foundation of the world of blood extinction was rapidly draining away. It was being led by a certain force and was leaking outwards. Following the source of this force, Lu Yi observed it carefully. He finally saw the ancestral artifact. At the wrist, there was a valley, and at the center of the valley was a 300-meter-tall altar. On top of the altar was a 10-meter-long bronze pestle. At first glance, there wasn't anything unusual about this pestle, but it gave off an extremely simple feeling. It was obviously quite old, and its surface was mottled with bronze and many of its profound patterns were missing. Around the altar, many blood race powerhouses gathered, each of them urging their strength to pour it into the bronze pestle, causing the altar to tremble incessantly. Lu Ye's mind drifted here without alarming any of the blood race members. This method of observation was absolutely grand, so even someone as strong as Ri Guang couldn't detect anything. End of chapter. Chapter 1832. If he wasn't mistaken, that bronze pestle should be the blood race's ancestral artifact, something left behind by the blood ancestor. This was why the blood race's Rikishiras could control the foundation of the world of absolute blood and control the southern minuscule mountain. However, no matter how Lu Yi looked at it, he couldn't see anything special about this pestle. It was only a few dozen meters long, while the blood ancestor was a colossus. A single strand of hair was tens of thousands of times longer than this thing. Why would she need something like this? He couldn't help but guess that this thing wasn't as simple as it looked. Many treasures in this world had the ability to change their size. Perhaps this pestle could be transformed to match the blood ancestor's body size. Lu Yi finally understood why the blood race had thrown so many blood sacrifices into the blood pool. It was because the blood vitality of these blood sacrifices could greatly reduce the consumption of the realm's foundation. If not for the situation, Lu Yi suspected that the world of absolute blood would have transferred a large number of blood sacrifices from other realms. However, the current situation made it impossible for the world of absolute blood to do so. Having ascertained everything, Lu Yi immediately prepared to take action. Every moment of delay would consume more of the foundation of the southern minuscule mountain, so the sooner it was over, the better. However, Lu Yi wasn't sure if things would progress as he expected, so he could only give it a try. Retracting his wandering thoughts, Lu Yi tried to mobilize the world of absolute blood. In an instant, just like what had happened in the world of blood, the entire realm began to shake. Mountains collapsed, rivers flowed in reverse, and the weather changed. Inside the realm, some people lost their footing and fell to the ground. There were even some blood race flying in the air who couldn't control themselves and fell to the ground. The altar in the valley was even more turbulent, and the 6 blood race Rikishiras gathered around it all paled. Someone cried out in alarm, "What's going on?" No one could give an answer. The other Rikishiras all wore solemn expressions. Their divine senses surged as they borrowed the strength of their blood race bloodline to strengthen their connection with the ancestral artifact. Each of the Rikishiras could clearly feel an inexplicably powerful resistance in the realm. This resistance seemed to be preventing them from mobilizing the foundation of their realm. In a moment of carelessness, their previous efforts had almost been in vain. Fortunately, this resistance was slowly being resisted as their own strength and their connection with the ancestral artifact deepened. Lu Yi felt the pressure. It was already very difficult to mobilize the entire domain by himself. If there were no other factors, there was a high probability that he could mobilize the world of absolute blood. Of course, it was hard to say how long he could maintain it. It could be a few breaths or a dozen breaths. It definitely wouldn't be too long. After all, the heavy armor, that was the world of absolute blood, gave him too much pressure. However, the situation in the world of absolute blood was completely different from that in the blood refining world. Here, there were 6 Rizhao activating the power of the ancestral artifact. In this situation, it was equivalent to both sides using the entire world of absolute blood as a battlefield. Whoever exerted the most power would be able to gain some control over the world of absolute blood. As Lu Yi continued to exert his power, the turbulence in the realm became more and more violent. The 6 Nicho of the Blood Clan did not dare to be careless and continued to exert their power. Suddenly, Rizhao of the Blood Clan exclaimed in surprise, "Our ancestor's power is recovering." He clearly thought that the power that was fighting against them came from the blood ancestor. He couldn't be blamed for having such a misunderstanding. Anyone in such a situation would have made similar inferences. Moreover, his inference was fundamentally correct. This was because Lu Ye's ability to mobilize the world of absolute blood did indeed come from the blood ancestor. It was an ability that came with refining the precious blood of the blood clan. Normally, this would definitely be news that would cause the entire blood clan to celebrate. The revival of their ancestors' power would undoubtedly bring great benefits to the entire clan. However, this was not the time. They were currently mobilizing the world of absolute blood's foundation, intending to encroach on minuscule mountain. Now that their ancestors' power had suddenly recovered and was fighting against them for control of the world of absolute blood, they inexplicably felt as if their ancestor had jumped out of his coffin and stabbed them in the back. Thus, after their joy, the Nicho of the Blood clan were very depressed. At this moment, they only had two choices. The first was to give up control of the world of absolute blood and allow their ancestors' power to continue recovering. Perhaps this would cause the entire world of absolute blood to undergo a miraculous change. However, if they did that, minuscule mountain would definitely run away. The second choice was to resist their ancestors' power and take minuscule mountain first. After a short moment of hesitation, the Nicho of the Blood clan had already reached a consensus: take minuscule mountain first. If they missed this opportunity, they would not have another one in the future. Relatively speaking, since their ancestors' power was showing signs of recovery, this would not be the only time. There would be more opportunities in the future. As a result, Lu Yi felt more and more pressure. The most obvious sign was that the turbulence in the world of absolute blood was slowly calming down. After realizing this, Lu Yi simply gave up on mobilizing the world of absolute blood. He could not go on like this. He was alone, and his cultivation level was only at the middle stage of the Moon Jade realm. He was facing 6 Nicho of the Blood clan, and he had the ancestral artifact to borrow power from. He was indeed no match for them. However, he could not find any helpers for this kind of matter. He could only rely on himself to solve it. For a moment, Lu Yi was in a difficult position. Suddenly, an idea flashed in his mind. Previously, when he was in the world of absolute blood, he had wondered if he could mobilize the world of absolute blood if he had enough blood clones. This was because the difficulty of exerting force from one point was different from exerting force from several points at once. However, although he had this idea at that time, he did not continue to try it. Even if he did succeed, it would not be of any practical use. Perhaps, at this time, he could try to see if his idea was correct. With this thought in mind, Lu Yi immediately condensed his blood clones. In the blink of an eye, 7 blood clones lingered around and quickly spread out, following the underground blood river towards the possible locations of nodes. Before refining the blood ancestors' blood, Lu Yi could store up to 5 drops of blood. No matter how much he condensed, he could not produce more blood. However, after refining the blood ancestors' blood, this limit had increased to 9 drops. Lu Yi did not know why such a change had occurred, but he felt that it should be related to the change in his divine nature. Out of the 9 drops of blood ancestors' blood, 2 had been consumed, so there were only 7 drops left. However, at the same time, with 7 clones, plus the main body and the talent tree clones, the burden on Lu Ye's mind was also very great. Unlike before, when he could perfectly form a formation with his 5 blood clones, if he were to form a formation with his 9 blood clones, it would not be so harmonious. This was because each blood clone needed to be controlled. Lu Yi could not change the situation for the time being. He was afraid that he would have to wait until he was promoted to Sunshine to improve. Although controlling so many blood clones at the same time could not be achieved to the extent of perfect control, at the moment he was not competing with others. He was simply looking for suitable positions, so the problem was not big. Time passed, and the precious blood clones slowly found a suitable place to settle down. After a few days, the 7 blood clones were finally settled down. In the conference hall of Mount Fengzhen in the south, the 8 Sunshine gathered, and Lu Ye's talent tree clone sat beside Su Yuqing. The hall was quiet, and the Sunshine were all waiting. Previously, after Lu Ye's original body had left, Su Yuqing had brought his talent tree clone to gather many Rizhao and informed them of Lu Ye's plan. Therefore, all the Rizhao knew that whether Mount Fengzhen would be able to escape this time would depend on whether Lu Ye's progress was smooth or not. However, what made the Sunshine a little worried was that since a few days ago, the blood clone left behind by Lu Yi suddenly became a little dull and was not as agile as before. At this moment, it seemed to be in a trance. Su Yuqing couldn't help but worry, and asked softly, "Are you okay?" After a full 3 breaths, the talent tree clone responded, "It's okay, there are too many clones, so it's difficult to take care of them." Su Yuqing didn't understand how many clones Lu Yi had to create such a strange situation. The doppelganger regained its previous agility. It looked at everyone in the Sunshine and said, "Senior brothers, I'm ready to make my move. I can't predict the specific effects, But whether or not we can escape depends on this move. Senior brothers, please make your preparations. Yu Qinglu nodded and said, Junior brother, just do your best, we will cooperate with you. As soon as the words fell, 8 figures rushed out of the hall and out of the world. The so-called cooperation was nothing more than 8 sunshine killing their way into the blood extinction world while Lu Yi was taking action. In this way, regardless of whether Lu Yi could seize control of the blood extinction world or not, the 8 sunshine would be able to turn the world upside down. Even if there were losses, they would protect Mount Fengzuan in the south. In the hall, the talent tree clone closed its eyes. In the blood extinction world, in the underground blood river, Lu Yi and the 7 treasured blood clones exerted their strength at the same time. In an instant, the world was turned upside down. At the altar, the 6 sunshine of the blood clan changed their expressions again. Someone exclaimed, "The power of the ancestor is recovering again, quickly suppress it." A few days ago, there was such a thing. At that time, they were caught off guard and were caught off guard. Fortunately, under their joint efforts, the recovery power was suppressed. They didn't expect that in just a few days, the power of the ancestor would show signs of recovery. Although the 6 sunshine of the blood clan were flustered, they didn't panic. After all, they had experienced it once and were more familiar with it this time. However, what they never expected was that the degree of recovery of the ancestor's power this time was many times more violent than the last time. In just a few breaths of time, the sunshine of the blood clan realized one thing: even if they relied on the power of the ancestral artifact, they couldn't suppress the powerful recovery power. How could this be? The sunshine of the blood clan, who had spoken earlier, had an incredulous look on his face. As soon as his voice fell, the entire blood extinction world shook even more violently. Next to him, a sunshine exclaimed, "Mount Fengzuan is collapsing." The other sunshine of the blood clan looked in the direction of the voice and saw unforgettable signs at a glance. Mount Fengzuan, which had stood tall in this world for tens of thousands of years, was collapsing rapidly, and large amounts of rocks rolled down. End of chapter. Chapter 1833. Looking at the entire blood extinction world, the 6-finger mountain was the most obvious symbol. The blood race went deep into the starry sky. No matter where they came from, as long as they saw the 6-finger mountain from afar, they would know that they were about to return home. It was also a natural barrier for the domain. Many years ago, there was a natural disaster that swept across the domain. At that time, a large meteor shower came from nowhere and swept across the starry sky. The blood extinction world happened to be within the range of this meteor shower. The natural barrier of the 6-finger mountain intercepted all the meteors that attacked the domain. In that natural disaster that was enough to cause heavy losses to any domain, the blood extinction world miraculously did not suffer any damage. It could be said that for the blood race of the blood extinction world, the 6-finger mountain was not just a strangely shaped symbol, but more like a totem. But now, this totem showed signs of collapse. With the collapse of the 6-finger mountain, the already turbulent domain became even more turbulent. Deep gullies appeared everywhere in the blood extinction world. Many blood race who were caught off guard screamed and fell into them. In just a dozen breaths of time, countless lives in the domain withered. The whole world was like the end of the world. The blood race under the constellations were incomparably terrified. They did not know what had happened. They only knew that death was constantly appearing around them. The 6 blood race Rizhao were flustered at this moment. The position of the valley they were in was the connection between the palm and the arm. As the 6-finger mountain collapsed, countless large and small stones smashed down, but they did not dare to dodge at all. At this moment, they were activating the power of the ancestral artifact with all their strength. Any abnormal movement could cause their previous efforts to be in vain. In desperation, they could only continuously attack and blow away the falling stones, but this only treated the symptoms and not the root cause. The 6-finger mountain is falling. Rizhao stole a glance at the 6-finger mountain and could not help but exclaim. When the other Rizhao heard this, they hurriedly looked up and saw this shocking scene. The six-finger-shaped mountain was slowly falling forward at a speed visible to the naked eye. The speed of the collapse was not fast, but it must be known that the collapse of such a huge object brought about an extremely terrifying momentum. The Rizhao people couldn't understand how such a thing could happen. They lived in the absolute blood world, and they were the descendants of the blood progenitor. Naturally, they knew that the absolute blood world was formed by the remains of the blood progenitor's body. It could be said that the entire absolute blood world was made up of countless thick rocks that wrapped around the blood progenitor's severed arm. The six-finger mountain was the blood ancestor's palm. Logically speaking, even if the six-finger mountain really collapsed, only the outer layer would collapse. The main body inside would not be affected because it was the body of the blood ancestor and was extremely sturdy. However, the situation now was that not only was the outer layer collapsing, but the main body inside was also collapsing. With the collapse of the six-finger mountain, the entire domain changed again. This time, it was truly earth-shattering. The landform of the domain suddenly underwent an extremely terrifying change at this moment. Starting from the middle of the domain, the entire front half of the domain suddenly tilted up. The shock brought about by this change was too great. The Rizhao people could no longer maintain their figures and flew up one after another. Using their divine sense, they were all enraged. Because at this moment, the blood extinction world was like a purgatory. Death and blood were everywhere. Many of their clansmen had already died, especially those under the constellations. Almost half of them had died, and the remaining half were fleeing in panic, but they did not know where to run to. Rumbling sounds rang out in every corner, like muffled thunder, shaking the hearts of the blood race cultivators. This kind of vibration lasted for dozens of breaths before it slowly stopped. The strange changes in the domain also subsided at this moment. The Rizhao people of the blood race were extremely shocked because at this moment, the domain that they had lived in for countless years had undergone a great change in form. Originally, the absolute blood world, when viewed from the starry sky, looked like a slightly bent arm, with the palm facing forward, in the shape of a flat palm. However, this was not the case now. This arm was bent at a right angle, and the palm that was originally raised flat had also become a tightly clenched fist. It was raised high, facing the distant starry sky, as if it was going to bombard the great danger in the unseen world. The scene of the six-finger mountain collapsing was undoubtedly the process of the palm turning from a palm to a fist. The entire domain seemed to have come alive. Such a huge change, it was easy to imagine the impact it had on the living beings in the domain. The power of the ancestor has really recovered. Rizhao murmured. Even in the blood race's philosophy, the ancestor would one day be reborn, but when this scene really happened before their eyes, they still found it hard to believe. It's not the right time to recover. Rizhao was heartbroken. He really couldn't understand why his ancestor's power didn't recover earlier or later. Why did it have to happen at this critical juncture? If it was any other time, this kind of recovery would be enough to make the entire blood race celebrate, but not now. Where's the Fangzuan mountain? The third blood race member, Rizhao, suddenly woke up. They had been working together to activate the ancestral weapon's power to restrict the movement of the Fangzuan mountain. Now that the domain had changed, the ancestral weapon's power was also cut off, and the power that restricted the movement of the Fangzuan mountain naturally no longer existed. When Rizhao's voice fell, the blood race's attention was attracted by an object. It was a small meteorite that looked like a fake mountain. It broke through the seal of the domain and directly crashed into a certain place in the absolute blood world. Not good. The expressions of the few Rizhao changed drastically. They originally thought that the Fangzuan mountain would escape quickly after breaking free of the ancestral weapon's suppression. After all, this was a rare opportunity. If they missed this opportunity, when they activated the ancestral weapon's power again, it would be a stalemate like before. Who would have thought that the Fangzuan mountain had no intention of leaving, and instead crashed directly into the domain? If it was just a small fake mountain meteorite crashing into the domain, it wouldn't be a big deal, and it wouldn't cause too much of an impact to the absolute blood world. However, this wasn't just a fake mountain meteorite. It was the Fangzuan Mountain, an entire domain. A loud boom rang out. The sound was so violent that even the Rizhao had never heard of it before. In the next moment, a sound even more terrifying than when the ancestral power was awakened spread out from the point of impact. At the point of impact, everything within a radius of tens of thousands of miles became barren, and all life was wiped out. The terrifying impact swept out, and more casualties continued to increase. Many blood race members who were lucky enough to survive the previous changes couldn't escape this time. They didn't even have time to react before they were turned into dust. Looking from the starry sky, the huge absolute blood world was knocked out of its original position in an instant. Rizhao couldn't help but cry out, "Ancestor, why did you abandon your people?" Today's change in the domain was the result of the ancestral power's awakening. This was originally a happy occasion for the blood race, but because the timing wasn't right, the happy occasion turned into a disaster. Enemy attack! An angry shout rang out, and Rizhao's aura suddenly descended. It was Yu Qinglu leading the 8 Rizhao from the little human race into the absolute blood world. They had received instructions from Lu Ye's talent tree clone and had left the Fangzuan Mountain to make preparations. They had seen the changes in the entire absolute blood world clearly from afar. Their original goal was to harass the blood race's Rizhao while Lu Yi was exerting his power, so that the Fangzuan Mountain could break free from the absolute blood world's restraint and escape. However, things went too smoothly, and the little human race was in no hurry to leave. Since the blood race was so hospitable, they would enter the world to take a look. Lu Ye's talent tree clone even slightly controlled the Fangzuan Mountain, changing its trajectory. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been so easy for the Fangzuan Mountain to crash into the absolute blood world. Taking advantage of the chaos in the absolute blood world, the 8 Rizhao from the little human race arrived with murderous intent. Not only that, the domain was still shaking. From the Fangzuan Mountain that crashed into the absolute blood world, figures rushed out. It was the little human race's cultivator army. The war had completely broken out, but the situation was completely different from when the blood race invaded the Fangzuan Mountain. At this moment, the roles of the attacking and defending sides were reversed, and the blood race became the passive side. At this time, in the absolute blood world, Lu Yi was sitting in the underground blood river, his mind radiating out to the entire domain. His eyes were closed, but there was a happy expression on his face. He was like a child who had gotten a new toy. At this moment, he felt incomparably novel. His main body and the 7 treasured blood clones had indeed broken the restraint brought by the blood race's ancestral artifact and successfully mobilized the absolute blood world. After the blood race's Rizhao no longer used the ancestral artifact's power, mobilizing the absolute blood world became much easier. To put it bluntly, the process of mobilizing the absolute blood world was like controlling a special magic treasure, and this magic treasure was one of the blood ancestor's arms. He could control this arm to clench it into a fist, and he could also control it to bend and straighten it. There was a sense of estrangement, and it wasn't as easy as controlling a finger. However, it was this simple manipulation that had brought about a calamity to all living beings in an entire realm. Lu Yi even had a feeling that he could really use this entire domain as an arm and wave it around. If any behemoth were to attack from the starry sky, he would be able to use this domain to fight it off. There were too many things to try and understand, but there was no time for that now. The war had already broken out, and the little human race had the absolute advantage. Under Rizhao's lair, after the unforeseen event just now, the blood race had suffered countless casualties, and even many of the constellations were injured. The elites of the little human race had all come out, and the blood race was directly beaten into a daze. Most of the blood race had no power to resist at all, and the few who could resist were quickly encircled and annihilated. On the battlefield, Rizhao's side had 8 against 6, and they also had the advantage. However, it wasn't so easy to kill the blood race's Rizhao. In the sea of blood, the blood race's Rizhao's figure appeared and disappeared. It was difficult for the little human race's Rizhao to accurately grasp it, and it was even more inappropriate to rush in rashly. They could only fight and slowly look for a good opportunity. End of chapter. Chapter 1834. While the battle was in full swing, Lu Ye's mind quietly locked onto one of the vampires, Rizhao. He tried to mobilize the foundation of the blood extinction realm to suppress him, just like how he suppressed the insect Rizhao in the inner world. If he could do it, all 6 of them would die here. But he soon realized that he was overthinking. He could mobilize the foundation of the inner world to suppress the insect Rizhao because he had refined the core origin. However, he couldn't do it now. Although he could mobilize the entire realm with the power of the blood ancestors' precious blood, it was impossible for him to precisely control the foundation of the blood absolute world to suppress the blood ancestors' sunshine unless he refined the origin of the blood absolute world. The world of absolute blood definitely had an origin, but not all domain origins could be refined. Some domain origins were scattered in every corner of the world of absolute blood. They had merged with the world of absolute blood and could not be refined. Only in this way would there be a possibility of refining the core origin. From this point of view, the origin of the 9 regions could also be refined, but Lu Yi had never thought of it, because refining the origin of the 9 regions was equivalent to refining Little 9, unable to use the foundation of the blood extinction realm to suppress the enemy. Lu Yi could only do it himself. Because of the collision, he stopped at Fangzuan Mountain in the south of the blood extinction realm. His talent tree clone suddenly flashed out, and then he activated his magic power. The lines under his feet were outlined and embedded, and in the blink of an eye, a void spirit pattern was formed. Ripples appeared in the spirit pattern, and Lu Ye's original body stepped out. Raising his hand and putting away the talent tree clone, Lu Yi looked up at the battlefield closest to him. A sea of blood was surging over there, and Rizhao was hiding in it. The one fighting against him was Qin Xianhai from the east. At this moment he was holding a rune sword in his hand, and as his body moved, he shot out sword qi toward the sea of blood. The sea of blood chased after him, trying to swallow him, but he dodged it time and time again. He naturally knew that it was not good to rashly enter the enemy's sea of blood when fighting against the blood extinction realm. Now that his side had the upper hand, Qin Xianhai was not anxious at all. He only needed to delay like this. When the time came, only the opponent would be anxious to win, and once the opponent was anxious, he would definitely reveal a flaw. At this moment, Qin Xianhai's expression changed. He dodged an attack from his opponent and turned his head to look in a certain direction. In that direction, an inconspicuous imperial equipment suddenly flew over. Qin Xianhai grabbed the imperial equipment in his hand. "Caught you!" The blood descendant Rizhao shouted, and the blood sea suddenly expanded. In an instant, Qin Xianhai, who was caught off guard, was covered by the blood sea. Rizhao of the blood clan was overjoyed that he had succeeded in killing Qin Xianhai. He never thought that the opportunity he had been searching for would arrive so soon. Just as he was about to launch an attack on Qin Xianhai, he suddenly felt a wave of magical energy from the blood sea that belonged to a mid-stage moon jade. This made him a little puzzled as he didn't know what was going on. He spread out his mind and immediately found the source of the magic power fluctuation. It was the dagger in Qin Xianhai's hand. Even though he knew that there was something fishy going on, Blood Tribe Rizhao still didn't take it seriously. After all, even if there was something fishy going on, Yu Yao's mid-stage magical energy fluctuations couldn't be faked. How much of a threat could she pose to him? With the cover of the blood sea, Rizhao easily arrived behind Qin Xianhai. His long, blood-red fingernails glowed with a cold light as he raised them up high, ready to launch a fatal attack on Qin Xianhai. At that moment, he suddenly saw a flash of light on the imperial equipment in Qin Xianhai's hand. A mysterious spiritual pattern appeared, and then a figure appeared. It was a young human. The magic power fluctuations on his body were exactly the same as the magic power fluctuations on the imperial equipment. He was sure that this was the owner of the imperial equipment. Rizhao of the blood clan didn't understand how the other party had arrived. He didn't sense any signs of the blood sea being broken through. How did this mid-stage moon jade appear so mysteriously? He secretly guessed that the other party had mastered some kind of exquisite teleportation technique. But so what? Anyone who dares to barge into my blood sea is courting death. With this thought in mind, he didn't show any mercy. Lu Yi suddenly raised his head and looked in the direction of Ri Zhao of the Blood Clan. As their eyes met, Lu Ye's eyes suddenly turned blood red. Countless fine and intricate lines intertwined, forming an extremely complex and strange pattern above his pupils. Ah! Ri Zhao of the Blood Clan cried out in alarm. Not far away, the mid-stage Moon Jade's figure suddenly grew taller, turning into a towering giant. She looked down at him from above. He even felt a natural suppression from those blood-red eyes, causing his heart to palpitate with fear. Even the blood in his body stopped flowing at this moment. Under the influence of those eyes, the momentum of his attack suddenly stagnated. In the next moment, something that Ri Zhao of the Blood Clan couldn't understand happened. A terrifying and dense holy aura suddenly erupted from the mid-stage Moon Jade's body. Under this natural suppression, his magic power stagnated, and his momentum fell sharply. His attack, which had already been weakened by the impact of the blood-red eyes, became weak and powerless in an instant. Chen Xianhai also turned around at this moment. The talisman sword in his hands seemed light as it slashed down, but it was actually a burst of power. He couldn't help but frown. This was because he felt that he wasn't cutting down Ri Zhao of the Blood Clan. Apart from the strength of his physical body, the other party's magic power was simply too weak. He easily broke through it. This slash directly cut Ri Zhao of the Blood Clan's body into two. Ri Zhao of the Blood Clan's eyes widened. He didn't even know how he died. He just stared at Lu Yi in horror and opened his mouth as if he wanted to say something. But Chen Xianhai didn't give him the chance. The talisman sword rose again and cut him into pieces like tofu. Ri Zhao's aura was annihilated, and the vast sea of blood also collapsed, turning into a rain of blood. Well done! Chen Xianhai praised. He grabbed Lu Ye's arm and rushed to the next battlefield. Of course, he knew that killing Ri Zhao so easily wasn't because he had become stronger, but because his opponent had become weaker. The reason for all of this was none other than Lu Ye's methods. The Blood Clan was a race that rose and fell because of their bloodline. Chen Xianhai could almost foresee the miserable life of the Blood Clan in the starry sky in the future. With a strange existence like Lu Yi, no Blood Clan member would have a good ending if they ran into him. At this moment, Lu Yi was recalling everything that had happened just now. Activating the Blood Eye Spirit Tattoo against the Blood Clan's Ri Zhao was a sudden inspiration. He wanted to see if this spirit tattoo had any miraculous effect against the Blood Clan. After all, the spirit tattoo originated from the Blood Ancestor. After this test, the results were truly unexpected. According to his previous understanding, the Blood Eye Spirit Tattoo was an invisible soul attack. Strictly speaking, it was actually a divine tattoo. Its function was to cause the enemy to hallucinate when attacking their soul, which in turn affected their judgment during battle. It could be regarded as an auxiliary method. Logically speaking, using the Blood Eye Spirit Tattoo against Ri Zhao shouldn't have any effect because the latter's soul power was far superior to his. His soul defense alone should have been enough to offset the effects of the Blood Eye Spirit Tattoo. However, Ri Zhao of the Blood Eye Spirit Tattoo was obviously affected. Although the effect wasn't great, it was enough to kill him. This was probably because the Blood Eye Spirit Tattoo originated from the Blood Ancestor. The Blood Clan was the descendant of the Blood Ancestor, so the power of the Blood Ancestor would have a certain degree of miraculous effect on the Blood Clan. Perhaps he could test it out with Xiang Yin and her sister. They were the first generation of the Blood Clan and his blood servants. The feedback they could provide would undoubtedly be more specific. As these thoughts flashed through his mind, Chen Xianhai had already brought him to the second Ri Zhao's battlefield. This time, it was Wen Xiong from the west against another Blood Clan member, Ri Zhao. When Chen Xianhai and Lu Yi arrived, Wen Xiong had already charged into the Blood Sea and was confronting the Blood Clan member head-on. The two sides were locked in a fierce battle. Wen Xiong was obviously at a disadvantage, but his momentum was unstoppable. Sensing Chen Xianhai's arrival, Ri Zhao of the Blood Clan couldn't help but panic. In a one-on-one battle, he could have the upper hand with the power of the Blood Sea, but in a two-on-one battle, he didn't have the confidence to do so. He wanted to shake off Wen Xiong, but the latter wouldn't give him the chance. He kept pestering him with all his might. When Chen Xianhai joined in, Ri Zhao of the Blood Clan was immediately at a disadvantage. The thick blood sea was turbulent, and the blood qi evaporated. Lu Yi found an opportunity to activate his divine attribute. Ri Zhao of the Blood Clan immediately let out a cry of surprise. He finally understood how his companion had died. He also finally understood why the Blood Clan had suffered so many casualties when they invaded Mount Fengsuan. There was an existence with such a terrifying divine attribute hidden among the enemy, and the Blood Clan didn't know about it. This was simply ironic. The second Blood Clan member, Ri Zhao of the Blood Clan, was quickly killed, the Blood Sea collapsed, and Chen Xianhai, Wang Xiong, and Lu Ye's figures appeared. Lu Yi looked around, but there was no trace of Ri Zhao of the Blood Clan. Even Ri Zhao of the Hominid Clan was nowhere to be seen. He knew that Ri Zhao of the Blood Clan must have escaped, and the Hominid Clan was probably chasing after him. It was reasonable. 2 of the 6 Blood Clan members had already died. Moreover, in the eyes of the few Ri Zhao who were still alive, their companion's death was too sudden and too inexplicable. It wasn't difficult for them to deduce that the Hominid Clan had a method to quickly kill Ri Zhao of the Blood Clan. Driven by the fear of the unknown and driven by their survival instincts, how could the 4 Ri Zhao who were still alive wait for death in the same place? They didn't run before because this was the realm where they were born. As long as there was a glimmer of hope, they wouldn't run. But now they had no choice but to run. If they stayed, they would follow in the footsteps of their companion. As long as they weren't idiots, they wouldn't stay and wait for death. But don't even think about escaping. Wang Xiong's face was full of indignation. As he spoke, he chased in a certain direction. Obviously, he didn't want to let any of the Blood Clan members go. Chen Xuanhai's divine telekinesis suddenly scanned the area, and he also led Lu Yi in another direction. Lu Yi didn't stop them, but he felt that the chances of chasing after them weren't high. The Blood Clan's ability to escape was top-notch, especially Ri Zhao of the Blood Clan. In the early stages, when he was focused on escaping, the Hominid Clan didn't have any good methods to deal with him. End of chapter. Chapter 1835. Sure enough, Chen Xuanhai's pursuit was fruitless. He obviously knew that continuing the pursuit would be a waste of time, so he returned to the Blood Extinction Realm with Lu Yi. The vampires suffered a great defeat in the Sunshine Realm. Of the 6 Sunshine Realm cultivators, 2 were killed and 4 escaped. If the 3 Sunshine Realm cultivators who were killed in the Southern Heart Mountain were included, more than half of the 9 Sunshine Realm cultivators in the Blood Extinction Realm had died in just a few days. This was an unimaginable and rare achievement. In fact, there were very few casualties in the Sunshine Realm, let alone such a large number of casualties. In the Blood Extinction Realm, the flames of war were swirling. The Sunshine Realm cultivators either died or fled. How could the remaining vampires have any fighting spirit and morale? Those who were quick to react had already escaped the realm, and those who were slow to react could only be killed. With the return of the Sunshine Realm cultivators, the elimination of the vampires in the Blood Extinction Realm became more thorough. A large number of vampires were killed, and in just a few days, there was almost no vampires left in the entire realm. Not only that, the flames of war began to spread throughout the Blood Extinction Galaxy. The Blood Extinction Galaxy was a rich galaxy with many large and small realms. These realms had always been under the bloody rule of the Blood Extinction Realm, and were bullied and oppressed by the vampires. The creatures in these realms could be regarded as food for the vampires, and their lives were miserable. Now that the Blood Extinction Realm had been destroyed, although the Miniman tribe couldn't kill all of them, they wouldn't let the vampires in other realms go. The Sunshine Realm cultivators rushed into the depths of the starry sky in groups of 2. Soon, all the realms in the entire galaxy were killed if they encountered any vampires. The Miniman tribe and the vampires had a feud. The division of Heart Mountain was the work of the Blood Ancestor. This information had been recorded in the Rest Abyss Pavilion and was engraved in the hearts of the Miniman tribe for generations. Unfortunately, with the division of Heart Mountain, the Miniman tribe also fell apart. Coupled with the special wandering method of the various tribes in Heart Mountain, they never had a chance to take revenge after so many years. This time, the destruction of the Blood Extinction Realm could be said to be a massacre to their heart's content, and they also ruthlessly vented the resentment in their hearts. Throughout the southern Heart Mountain, the Miniman tribe cheered and felt that their Sunshine Realm cultivators were superior. As Sunshine Realm cultivators, the vampires' Sunshine Realm cultivators were nothing. Only a small number of people knew that the reason for this decisive victory was not because of the humanoids themselves, but because of the human Lu Yi. At this moment, Lu Yi was sitting cross-legged at the spot where the altar had once been. A several dozen meter-long bronze pestle was placed across his knees, his eyes closed in concentration. This thing was an ancestral weapon of the blood race, and according to Lu Ye's understanding, it was something left behind by the blood ancestor. That was why the blood race could use it to mobilize the power of realms. Previously, under his control, the six-finger mountain had turned from a palm to a fist. The mountain had collapsed, and the altar had been buried. The ancestral artifact had also been buried deep underground. It wasn't easy for him to dig it out. He wanted to find out what was so special about this item that it could make several vampires, who weren't the masters of the domain, work together to mobilize the power of the domain. However, the strange thing was that no matter how he inspected it, he was actually unable to discern anything special about this pestle. It was like an ordinary treasure that had been passed down from ancient times, and it didn't emanate any energy fluctuations. However, Lu Yi could rely on this pestle to strengthen his connection with the entire Blood Extinction Realm. In other words, he could also use this item to mobilize the domain like the vampires did. Perhaps it was because he had refined the blood of the blood ancestor, but he could do it better and more easily than the vampires. Previously, when he mobilized the domain, he needed to go deep into some specific locations in the Blood Extinction Realm's underground blood river, using his true body and the 7 blood clones, but now he didn't need to. With the pestle in hand, he could do the same thing. If the previous method was compared to Lu Yi wearing the entire Blood Extinction Realm on his body and turning it into something like armor, then using the ancestral artifact to mobilize the domain was like turning the Blood Extinction Realm into a marionette. The method of mobilizing and controlling the domain was different, but the result was the same. Presumably, those vampires, Nicho, had done the same. With the help of the ancestral artifact, the Blood Extinction world had become a puppet in their hands. Lu Yi still remembered that under the control of those Nicho, the six-fingered mountain shook slightly and pushed out a huge bloody handprint toward the starry sky. The power of the handprint injured the 8 Nicho of the hominid clan and forced them to retreat in a sorry state. The power of that blow was extremely terrifying. He could also do this now. Lu Ye's heart was burning. Although the Blood Extinction Realm was a domain, with his current means, he could completely use this domain as a killing weapon. If he could shrink the Blood Extinction Realm and carry it with him at all times, why would he need to be afraid of Rizhao? That day on the 10,000 Elephant Sea, Lu Yi still remembered the terrifying pressure from Yuandu. The road of cultivation was long, and before he had enough strength, many external forces were indispensable. Unfortunately, he could only think about it. The Blood Extinction Realm was a domain, and its size was not small. It was not a magical weapon, so Lu Yi certainly couldn't carry it with him at all times. In his imagination, Lu Yi suddenly had a flash of inspiration. If he could bring the Blood Extinction Realm back to the 9 regions, it seemed to be a good idea. Although the 9 regions already had the backing of Mount Fangsuan and basically had no worries about self-protection, who would complain about having more means of self-protection? If he could really bring the Blood Extinction Realm back to the 9 regions, the 9 regions would undoubtedly have another powerful means of self-protection. In addition, the Blood Extinction Realm and the Blood Extinction Realm were of the same origin and were both part of the Blood Ancestor's body. Lu Yi had tried to mobilize the Blood Extinction Realm before, but to no avail. The reason why he didn't continue to try was that he felt that with his current strength, it was too difficult. Secondly, he felt that even if he succeeded, it would be meaningless. The entire Blood Extinction Realm was just a torso without a head and limbs. Even if he could mobilize it, what could he do? But if he could bring the Blood Extinction Realm back, The huge torso would have an arm to wave. Just imagine, if the torso of the Blood Extinction Realm waved the arm of the Blood Extinction Realm, how magnificent would the scene be? Who would be able to block such a terrifying attack? Of course, if he really wanted to do this, his cultivation must be greatly improved, otherwise, it would be impossible. But cultivation could be slowly accumulated, and if he missed this opportunity, it would be difficult to encounter it again in the future. As soon as this idea arose, he could no longer suppress it. He wanted to bring the Blood Extinction Realm back to the 9 regions. It was very difficult to achieve this. The migration of a domain was not a joke, but it was not without hope. For the next period of time, Lu Yi had been busy with this matter. A month after Mount Fengxun hit the Blood Extinction Realm in the south, the Rizhao who went out to clean up the blood race returned one after another. During this period of time, the 8 of them went to various parts of the galaxy, passed through one domain after another, and killed all the blood race they could find. In those many domains, the creatures of various races who had been enslaved and oppressed by the blood race for countless years all bowed down to them in gratitude. In the Blood Extinction Realm, in the palace that originally belonged to some blood race's Rizhao, the 8 Rizhao of the humanoid race gathered. After the great battle, the palace was also affected, but fortunately, it did not completely collapse and could still be used. After a long time, Yu Qinglu sighed. If we don't remove the roots, what we have done today will not be able to solve the problem at its root. During this period of time, although the blood race had suffered heavy casualties, there were still 4 Rizhao of the blood race who escaped with their lives, as well as some Yu Yao and Xing mansions. They must have gone into hiding or escaped from this galaxy, which was why the Rizhao of the humanoid race could not find their whereabouts. In the short term, they would not dare to come back, but the humanoid race could not stay here forever. They had to continue on their journey, and the blood race also knew this. Once the humanoid race left, the Rizhao of the blood race and the other Yu Yao and Xing mansions would return, and the many domains they had saved today would fall into the hands of the blood race again. There's nothing we can do about it. Zhang Kuan sighed. There are so many living beings in so many domains. We can't take them all away, but we can't leave them behind either. Our race has already done everything we can. Everyone was silent. Although they knew that the future would be like what they had imagined, they still found it hard to accept. When they were exterminating the blood race this time, they had personally witnessed the tragic lives of many living beings. Some races that had been oppressed were literally reared like animals. There's a way. A voice suddenly came from outside the palace. Everyone knew who had come without even looking. Lu Yi stepped in, and Wen Xiong immediately greeted him warmly. Junior brother Lu. Junior brother. Junior brother Lu. Greetings rang out one after another. In the entire galaxy, Lu Yi was probably the only one who could make so many Rizhao warmly welcome Yu Yao. Greetings, senior brothers and sisters. Lu Yi bowed in all directions. He looked up and saw Su Yuqing waving at him, indicating for her to sit over there. Lu Yi walked over and sat down beside Su Yuqing. What have you been busy with recently? I heard from Xiang Yin that we haven't even seen your shadow. Su Yuqing asked. She had looked for Lu Yi when she came back, but she couldn't find him. She had asked Xiang Yin and Xiang Yin, but they said that they didn't know either. If Lu Yi hadn't taken the initiative to appear now, Su Yuqing really wouldn't have known where to look for him. I've been busy with something important, Lu Yi said mysteriously. The group of Rizhao became interested. Yu Qinglu said, Junior brother, is the thing you're talking about related to what you said just now? That's right. Lu Yi nodded. Chen Xianhai raised his eyebrows. Junior brother, do you have a way to solve the problem that this galaxy will face in the future? It was undeniable that Lu Yi had a unique advantage when it came to dealing with the blood race. However, killing the enemy was one thing, and dealing with the aftermath was another. The group of Rizhao gathered here were all at their wits' end. They didn't have a solution, but Lu Yi seemed to be very confident. Chapter 1836. Within the palace, Zhu Rizhao looked at Lu Yi with great interest. Since Lu Yi dared to say this, he must be confident. The Rizhao were all looking forward to it. If there really was a way to solve the problem at its root, it would be a relief. As for whether he could do it or not, he had already found the core of Mount Fengzhen. He had already proven his abilities. Lu Yi didn't beat around the bush. It's very simple. It doesn't matter if we can't take away so many creatures. We just need to take away the entire blood extinction realm. As soon as he said this, the hall fell silent. It had to be said that Lu Ye's idea was very bold. This was something the Rizhao had never thought of. But thinking about it carefully, it was indeed a good idea. The blood extinction realm was the foundation of the blood race's survival in this galaxy. Why hadn't anyone come to exterminate the blood race after so many years? It was because of the existence of the blood extinction realm. The Rizhao of the blood race could mobilize the power of the realm to defend against external enemies. The Rizhao of the hominid race had suffered a loss before. If this foundation was destroyed, the blood race would become a tree without roots and water without a source. Even if they could survive in other realms, they would lose their strongest means of defending against external enemies. At that time, the hominid race wouldn't even need to do anything. They would only need to leak some crucial information, and there would naturally be factions who had a grudge against the blood race. The blood race would no longer have a foothold in this galaxy. After a while, Yu Qinglu said, "I know Junior Brother has brought back the core before, but the inner world is completely different from the blood extinction realm. Junior Brother, are you confident you can control the blood extinction realm?" Although the inner world was also a realm, it didn't look too big from the outside. Lu Yi had refined the core's origin, so he could naturally control it like a starboat. The blood extinction realm was different. It was so big, and Lu Yi hadn't refined its origin, so he couldn't use the same trick. Lu Yi said, "I don't need to control this realm." Not to mention that he couldn't do it. Even if he could, it would take many years to bring the blood extinction realm back to the 9 states from this position. He didn't have the time to do this. Chen Xianhai was curious. "If you don't control this realm, how will you bring it away?" Lu Yi immediately explained his plan. The Rizhao of the Rizhao were dumbfounded. He had to admit that this plan was a little whimsical, but he had to admit that this plan was really feasible. Lu Yi came here mainly to explain his plan to Rizhao. After all, the most crucial part of this plan was Mount Fengzhen in the south. Rizhao had the right to know. After listening to Lu Ye's explanation, Yu Qinglu pondered for a moment before nodding. "Since Junior Brother has an idea, then go ahead and do it. If we can really save the creatures of this star system from the sea of suffering, that is also the hope of my little human race." "Many thanks, Senior Brother. I'll take my leave now," Lu Yi said and left the hall in a flash. At the same time, the 7 doppelgangers who had been searching deep underground returned one after another. During this time, the 7 treasured blood clones had been searching underground. Lu Yi wanted to see if there were any remnants of the blood ancestors' treasured blood in this world. In the inner world, there was a drop of the blood ancestors' blood. That thing had even given birth to an ignorant spirit. There was also a drop in the blood refinement realm, but it was suppressed by an ancient seal. Today, that drop of blood was very incomplete. These 2 drops of blood had been refined by Lu Yi and strengthened his divine nature. Therefore, Lu Yi wanted to know if there was any in the blood refinement realm. Unfortunately, during this period of searching, he had found nothing. It seemed that there was none. Lu Yi was not disappointed. The greatest benefit of refining the blood ancestors' treasured blood was the improvement of his divine nature. At present, his divine nature was strong enough to crush any vampire. It would be good if he could find it, but it didn't matter if he couldn't. When the treasured blood clones returned, Lu Yi condensed his talent tree doppelganger and let it enter Mount Fengzhen in the south to control the south in place of his original body. When everything was ready, he began to implement his plan. He took out the long pestle ancestral artifact, and his divine nature surged and boiled. Soon the realm hummed and shook. Looking at it from the starry sky, the absolute blood world was still in the shape of a clenched fist with its forearms raised. However, with Lu Ye's urging, the clenched fist slowly unclenched and the raised arms straightened. At the same time, Mount Fengzhen in the south, which had been stopped in the blood refinement realm because of the collision, also began to move under the control of the talent tree doppelganger. Because after colliding with the blood refinement realm, the talent tree doppelganger immediately used the power of the realm lord to seal the entire Mount Fangtsuan in the south. Therefore, for the past month, the south was not attracted by the core, which was why it could stay in the blood refinement realm. Otherwise, under the core's guidance, the south would have left long ago. Under the control of his original body and the talent tree doppelganger, the two realms moved respectively. Slowly, Mount Fangtsuan in the south moved to the open palm of the blood refinement realm. After a fierce collision, it was embedded halfway up the six-finger mountain, which was the position of the palm. The open palm closed again. Looking at the posture, it was like a big hand grabbing a grain of sand. After a brief investigation and confirming that everything was correct, the talent tree doppelganger guarding Mount Fangtsuan in the south released the seal on the realm. In an instant, the core's guidance force from the distant starry sky came, and Mount Fangtsuan in the south began to show signs of drifting toward the core. However, because the entire Mount Fangtsuan in the south was embedded in the palm, its movement immediately led the blood refinement realm to move. The speed was very slow, but it was indeed moving. Sensing this change, Lu Yi raised his eyebrows. Although the situation would indeed develop like this in his deduction, he did not expect it to go so smoothly. In his plan, it was unrealistic to rely on himself to control the blood refinement realm and bring the entire realm back to the 9 states. Doing so would be a waste of time and energy. The end of Mount Fangtsuan in the south was the 9 states. This was a very good target to borrow strength from, so he only needed to keep the blood refinement realm and Mount Fangtsuan in the south moving in the same direction. By embedding Mount Fangtsuan in the blood refinement realm, the movement of Mount Fangtsuan in the south would lead the blood refinement realm. This was equivalent to letting Mount Fangtsuan in the south bring the blood refinement realm back. When the south reached the 9 states, the blood refinement realm would also arrive. Time passed, and the straightened giant arm moved faster and faster in the starry sky. During this period, Lu Yi took the initiative to help. On his original body's side, he could use the ancestral artifact to slightly activate the blood refinement realm and increase its speed. On the talent tree doppelganger's side, he could freely control Mount Fangtsuan in the south. In this way, increasing the speed became very simple. Only when the speed reached a limit did Lu Yi stop. The changes in the entire realm were seen by the Rizhao. Although they had already seen the whole picture when Lu Yi explained the plan, when the plan was actually implemented, they were still amazed. Since ancient times, such a bizarre thing had never happened in the starry sky. Still in the palace hall, the Rizhao gathered together. Unlike last time, they were all smiling. Lu Yi had taken away the blood refinement realm, which was equivalent to destroying a foundation realm of the blood race. In the entire starry sky, the blood race only had a total of 5 foundation realms. Losing one was an unbearable pain for the entire blood race. A normal war was nothing more than killing, but Lu Ye's side had completely destroyed the enemy's realm. This was really satisfying. It was far more exciting than killing some blood race members before. In this way, those fleeing blood race cultivators would no longer have a chance to occupy this galaxy in the future. The many realms in this galaxy would also be saved. As for where those fleeing blood race members would go in the future, there was no need to think about it. They could only go to the other 4 foundation realms. This would probably be a long and arduous journey, and there would be many obstacles along the way. It was unknown how many blood race members would be able to arrive safely. Unfortunately, there are no foundation realms near my western route. Otherwise, I would be able to vent my anger. Zhang Kuan sighed with regret. With the support method unique to the humanoid race and Lu Ye's miraculous methods, if there really was a foundation realm of the blood race blocking Mount Fangtsuan in the west, it would definitely not end well. When Lu Yi heard this, he immediately revealed a disappointed expression. He originally wanted to ask about this matter, but now he didn't. Yu Qinglu said, "This matter is not urgent. After Mount Fangtsuan is unified, we can properly discuss how to deal with the blood race. This race should also be wiped out from the starry sky." His words were calm, but they were filled with dense killing intent. The group of people looked forward to it. When the time came, they could even let Lu Yi drive the complete Mount Fangsuan to visit the foundation realms of the blood race one by one and completely eradicate them. In this way, not only would they be able to avenge their race, but they could also be said to have eliminated evil for the starry sky. When the time came, who knew how many galaxies and realms would be deeply grateful to the humanoid race? Lu Yi naturally didn't reject this matter. There was one piece of the blood ancestor's body in the 9 states. When the southern Mount Fangsuan went to the southern region, there would be a second piece. He also wanted to piece all the pieces together. If he could do this, he would be able to control the blood ancestor's body. What kind of armor could compare to this thing? But before that, there was one more thing to take care of. Senior brothers from the southern region, Mount Fangsuan is now moving towards the 9 states with the blood extinction realm. It might bring harm to some of the realms ahead. Therefore, I have to ask the southern region's senior brothers to carefully investigate the route ahead. If there are realms blocking the way, you must inform me immediately. Originally, Mount Fangsuan was moving through the starry sky and basically wouldn't encounter such a situation. After all, Mount Fangsuan's body was very small. Some of the larger meteorites were bigger than Mount Fangsuan. Therefore, basically, there wouldn't be a sudden collision with a certain realm. But now, it was different. Mount Fangsuan was also moving with the blood extinction realm. This thing was like a huge clenched fist. If it really collided with a certain realm, it would definitely cause a huge disaster. Lu Yi didn't want such a tragic thing to happen. If it really happened, then his sin would be great. Therefore, he had to take precautions. There's an urgent matter. I have to go out. End of chapter. That you're tuning in to the Han Li's Immortal Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.